Chapter 893. One by one, great beings came to visit. These great masters were different from ordinary people. Every one of them had the ability of a veteran master. Against ordinary great masters, they could fight 1 against 2, or even 1 against 3. In the system of the Master of Gods, they were existences at the level of the Divine King. Originally, Qing Su and Taoist Clearwater's battle prowess was already enough to contend against the Supreme God of Glory. As long as he could draw in 2 or 3 more of them, it would not be difficult to defeat or even kill the Supreme God of Glory. Tsing Hui invited these people into the mountain peak 1 by 1. While talking with them, another 3 great beings came to visit, making the number of great beings in front of Tsing Hui to choose from reached 6. When Tsing Hui proposed to kill an ultimate god with everyone, all the great beings present agreed. 4 of them agreed to go with Tsing Hui. In order to obtain the help of 4 great beings, Tsing Hui only had to pay 12 servants as a favor. Considering the urgency of time, Tsing Hui directly asked the 4 of them to agree to go with him to kill the ultimate god who invaded the territory of the Master of Chaos. Tsing Hui himself further understood the great Tao laws of the 2 divine beasts, Kun Peng and Chaos. His cultivation path itself was based on the unification Great Tao and the creation Divine Jade as the soil to condense the 3,000 great Taos and recreate the immortal civilization world. He then gathered the great Tao laws of the 12 divine beasts and traced back to the origin plate to create a real immortal civilization world. From there, he advanced to the 4th tier of the Chaos realm and became an existence at the same level as the evil gods in the outside world. As for whether he could rely on this reconstructed world of immortal civilization to resonate with the damaged world of immortal civilization and reach a higher level of cultivation, that was unknown. Even Qing Su had no idea what level of cultivation he would reach by then. Comprehending the great Tao of Chaos represented by Kun Peng and Kun Peng had skipped the stage of condensing 3,000 great Tao, but it wouldn't affect Tsing Hui's cultivation. On the contrary, when he reached this stage again with the foundation he had now, he would be able to merge the bloodlines of Kun Peng and Chaos more smoothly. During these 3 years, Tsing Hui's understanding of the Kun Peng and the Chaos Divine Beast's great Tao had deepened, and he was faintly showing signs of fusing them into the return to one great Tao. However, since he hadn't completed the first step of the plate of Tao, he hadn't created a virtual world of immortal Tao civilization with the 3,000 great Taos and the creation Jade. If he forcibly refined the great Taos represented by the bloodlines of the Kun Peng and the divine beasts of chaos into the great Tao of coalescence, not only would he spend a long time like the other great Taos, but he would also damage the great Tao of coalescence if he wasn't careful, which would make his future cultivation even more difficult. Only when the immortal Tao civilization was remade, and Tsing Hui used his own Tao of unity to become the heavenly Tao of the immortal Tao civilization, could he borrow the power of the entire immortal Tao civilization to bear the great Tao of chaos and Kun Peng, easily completing the refinement of the 2 great Tao. As the saying went, sharpening a knife does not delay the work of cutting wood. Creating a virtual world of immortal Tao civilization doesn't just make refining the 12 divine beasts' great Tao easier. Most importantly, it can resonate with the broken immortal Tao civilization in the future, refining it into the world I've created with the return to one great Tao. This will allow me to experience another upgrade when I break through to the 4th level of the Chaos realm. By then, I might not reach the level of the Master of Chaos, the Master of Time, or the Master of Gods, but at least I won't be like those ordinary evil gods, driven away by those 3 peak existences, Tsing Hui mumbled to himself. A moment of patience in exchange for soaring to the heavens in the future. He naturally knew what was more important. But before that, he had to deal with the immortal Tao civilization as soon as possible. At that thought, Tsing Hui directly sent a message to the 4 great Taos who had accepted his invitation: Yin Kong Zi, Senli Realm Lord, Saint Fan Realm Lord, and Tianqi King. It didn't take long for the 4 great Taos to meet up with Tsing Hui and Tao Lord Clearwater, and the 6 of them quickly rushed in the direction of the glorious divinity. In the territory of the Master of Chaos, cultivators below the Dominator realm could only use the super space-time cannons to travel, but the great divinities had many more options to choose from, and the convenience of traveling was far beyond what the super spacetime cannons could compare to. Even though they were currently at the edge of the Master of Chaos domain, they still used less than 10 years to arrive at the location Tsing-Hui had mentioned. It should be around here, Tsing-Hui said. The glorious divinity was currently pursuing the immortal Dao civilization, and the immortal Dao civilization was still in contact with Tsing-Hui. The place he was currently at was the coordinates the heavenly lord of myriad treasures had sent him a month ago. I can sense the vast aura of divine force. A powerful god has indeed appeared here. Oh, there's also the aura of the immortal Dao civilization? But it's too weak, and they've probably been destroyed by those gods. Yin Kong Zi carefully sensed for a moment and quickly said. Saint Fan Realm Lord smiled and said, Mr. Yin Kong Zi's tracking technique is unparalleled in the world. We'll have to trouble you to track down the glorious divinity's location. That's easy. The traces they left here have dissipated less than a month ago, so they won't be able to hide from my eyes. With that, Yin Kong Zi flicked his hand, and an invisible ripple triggered the power of the ways in the territory of the Master of Chaos. It quickly spread out in all directions. It was like a stone being tossed into a calm lake. If the ripples continued to spread, they would reach the entire lake very quickly. This is the Yuan soul sensing technique. It can be said to be one of the strongest tracking techniques in our lineage. It was passed down by our Grand Development Gates Elder E. With this secret technique, unless Hierarch Brilliant has already left the territory of the Master of Primal Chaos or is dead, no matter how well he hides, he will not be able to escape. The Saint Fan Realm Lord smiled and said, It's a pity that I haven't learned Elder Yi's Great Development Technique. That's the true supreme technique. It's said that the Great Development Technique was derived from Elder Yi's deduction technique based on the characteristics of the chaos. It may be inferior to a 10th level deduction technique in some aspects, but it's superior in terms of tracking and exploration. Yin Kong Zi said regretfully. After he finished speaking, he had already sensed something. He raised his head and looked towards the horizon. If I'm not wrong, it should be over there. Everyone, please follow me. With Yin Kong Zi leading the way, the group quickly chased after him. In less than half a month, a huge divine system that was concealing its divine power fluctuations appeared in the senses of the 6 great masters. This divine system was composed of 3 large divine kingdoms, over 60 medium divine kingdoms, and tens of thousands of small divine kingdoms. Although the entire divine system was concealing its divine power fluctuations, the structure of many divine kingdoms was still like a huge cluster of galaxies. It occupied an area far larger than the divine wilderness great world. However, because the starry universe was too vast, and there were too few experts who could reach the level of great masters, such a huge divine system was not noticed by anyone as it moved quickly in the Master of Chaos domain. Or, they might have been discovered by someone, but before they could spread the news, they would be annihilated by this huge divine system, so that no one knew about them. This is the divine system of the glorious divinity. Tsing-Hui said. Well then, everyone, let's proceed according to the tasks assigned to us. Compared to an individual, the greatest difference between a divine system and a divine system is the collective power. If the master of the divine system, the glorious divinity, were to mobilize the power of the entire divine system, none of us would be able to resist. The best way to defeat a divine system is to disintegrate it and not give the master of the divine system the opportunity to mobilize the power of the divine system. Lord Clearwater said. Then, according to what we said earlier, the task of blocking the glorious divinity will be left to me. Tsing-Hui nodded. Lord Clearwater added, I'll be responsible for dealing with the superior god on the right side of the divine system. Leave the superior god on the left side of the divine system to me. I have some experience in attacking. Realm Lord Senli laughed. Then Yin Kong Zi, Realm Lord Saint Fan, and I will be responsible for cutting apart the divine system of the glorious divinity and not allowing him to combine the powers of the divine system. Tianchi King said. As the 6 great experts discussed, it was already equivalent to sentencing the glorious divinity to death. Being able to borrow the power of a divine system and not being able to do so were 2 different concepts. As long as their plan was successful and they could cut apart the divine system of the glorious divinity, any one of the six would have the ability to contend against the glorious divinity. Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! After the six great experts finished their discussion, Xing Hui let out a low roar and all of them simultaneously manifested their Grand Tao energy. This time, the Grand Tao energy they manifested was different from when Xing Hui and Lord Clearwater sparred using Grand Tao laws. When the six great experts went all out, their Grand Tao energy manifested through divine beasts. In an instant, 6 terrifying beasts with an area of over 100 million kilometers appeared in the endless void. Each of these terrifying beasts was condensed from energy that had been condensed to the extreme. They could easily pluck the stars and grab the moon with a wave of their hand. If they were to charge, they could even penetrate a world similar to the divine wilderness great world and shatter it. Enemy attack. Great experts of the Lord of Primal Chaos. Damn it, why did 6 great divine ability practitioners suddenly appear here? It hasn't even been 5 years since we entered the Lord of Primal Chaos territory. How could we be targeted by great experts in such a short time? Everyone, be careful. The appearance of the 6 terrifying monsters immediately caused the gods of the glorious divinity's divine system to cry out in alarm. Powerful ripples of divine power spread out from those divine kingdoms, about to connect to the divine kingdoms of the glorious divinity and forge them into an iron plate. But before they could completely solidify the power of the divine kingdoms, Xing Hui, who had transformed into the Kunpeng, had already charged into the divine system of the glorious divinity with immense power. For a moment, the unprecedented impact formed a shockwave that could be seen with the naked eye. It exploded and spread out, officially opening the curtains to this unprecedented battle of gods. Chapter 894. 6 gigantic beasts spanning over 100 million kilometers, each of which was supported by the power of Grand Tao laws, could erupt with destructive power. Even the shockwaves that spread out were enough to destroy a major world. This was the power of the all-out attacks of the powerful experts. This was no longer a confrontation between living beings, but a collision between laws. Under this sudden attack, even though the glorious god had maintained sufficient vigilance, the glorious god's pantheon was still brazenly torn apart by the 5 powerful experts. The 2 high gods of the glorious god's pantheon, as well as the connection between the glorious god's pantheon and the pantheon, were mostly torn apart. A large number of ordinary true gods and lower gods were swept away by the destructive power when the pantheon was torn apart, turning into ashes. Even those mid-level gods who were equivalent to rulers were unable to put up a decent resistance against the attacks of the remaining 3 powerful experts. The gigantic divine beast phantoms they had transformed into could crush a mid-level god and their pantheon with a single strike, exploding into spatial turbulence. Within the exploding spatial turbulence, it was possible to see a large number of creatures below the true god realm screaming miserably as they fell from their pantheon. In the next second, they were crushed to pieces by the shockwaves of the battle between the peak existences. Destruction. This was a true war of destruction. Compared to a battle of destruction of this level, the battle where Qing Su had slain so many of the sovereigns in the divine wilderness great world and defeated the invasion of several great worlds was not even worth mentioning. The sovereigns who had died at his hands did not even have the right to participate in this battle. Once they approached the very center of the battle, the energy shockwaves from the full-powered attacks of the great masters would be enough to kill them all. Grand Development Gate. The glorious god, who had been ambushed, roared furiously. As a high god existence, especially the leader of a huge pantheon, he naturally understood the existence of this peak faction in the territory of the master of primal chaos. Seeing his pantheon being attacked by 6 powerful experts, he immediately determined the identity of the other party. For a moment, he was enraged. At the same time, his pantheon violently expanded from several kilometers to several billion kilometers, rapidly enveloping the pantheons of the other mid-level gods, lower gods, and true gods. Seeing this scene, Xing Hui, in the form of a Kunpeng, used all his strength to grab the region with the most mid-level gods. A berserk spatial storm strangled the pantheons of 3 mid-level gods and nearly 100 lower gods. Under this spatial storm, those powerful mid-level gods' pantheons were like sand sculptures exposed to a metal storm, rapidly collapsing and sputtering out a large amount of pantheon fragments. As for the lower gods' pantheons, they were even more miserable. Some of the pantheons that bore the brunt of the spatial storm were directly swept up, torn apart, and turned into fragments. The lower gods who maintained the pantheons naturally could not escape death when their pantheons collapsed. The collapse of a large number of pantheons also created a vacuum in the area covered by the glorious god's pantheon, greatly slowing down the speed at which he absorbed the pantheon into his pantheon. While the power of the glorious god's pantheon was being delayed, the other several powerful experts also went on a killing spree, wantonly slaughtering in the pantheon of the glorious god. A large number of pantheons were being destroyed at almost every moment, and tens of thousands of creatures died. The intensity of the war far exceeded everyone's imagination. This sovereign has come this time to exterminate the remnants of the immortal civilization. I originally did not wish to become enemies with your grand development gate. If you withdraw now, this sovereign can still let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, even if you manage to defeat this sovereign's pantheon in the end, this sovereign will make one or two of you pay the price of eternal death. The glorious god let out a furious roar. In the center of the pantheon of true gods, lower gods, and higher gods, a golden figure suddenly appeared. Boundless radiance spread out from his body, illuminating everything, forming golden flames that burned Tsing Hui in the form of a Kunpeng. The might of the flames was so great that the Kunpeng projection of Tsing Hui was annihilated inch by inch. "Everyone, you need to hurry," Tsing Hui bellowed. Even without borrowing the power of the pantheon, the glorious god could not be considered weak. He could already mobilize a portion of the pantheon's power. Even if it was only a sixth of the pantheon's power, it was still enough to greatly increase his battle prowess. Unless Tsing Hui could cast aside his disguise and attack with his full strength, he would be at a disadvantage. Just give me a little more time, and we'll be able to completely tear his pantheon apart. The powerful experts also used their full strength. The pantheons of lower gods and even mid-gods were being destroyed one after another, infuriating the glorious god. As for the two high gods, they wanted to draw closer to the divinity of glory and join his pantheon, strengthening each other's power. Unfortunately, Tao Lord Clearwater and Realm Lord Grim were much more powerful than they were. Under their all-out attacks, it was already extremely difficult for them to protect themselves, much less join forces with the divinity of glory. The imitation of the Kunpeng's Grand Tao means that I'm only able to use 70% of my power, which is why I'm completely suppressed by the glorious god. If it wasn't for the fact that I actually have the Grand Tao of Unity to imitate the power of a chaos divine beast, I probably would have been defeated long ago. However, the glorious god's power is actually on par with mine. Even if he's stronger, he's only slightly stronger. The key is that he's able to use the pantheon's power. While Tsing Hui and the glorious god were battling, Tsing Hui had been distracted by sensing the marvelous abilities of the glorious god's pantheon. This pantheon's power reminded him of the second level of his Grand Tao Disc technique. That level was to use one's own Grand Tao of Unity to transform into the heavenly Tao, condensing 3,000 Grand Taos and imitating a world of immortal civilization. Wasn't that method similar to how the glorious god used his own body to activate the pantheon's power? It was just that the other members of the glorious god's pantheon were higher gods and intermediate gods, while his pantheon was made up of 3,000 Grand Taos. There were 6 great masters, and every one of them could be considered outstanding in their realm. Naturally, defeating the glorious god's pantheon wasn't difficult. Finally, as the elusive Yin Kongzi completely tore apart the glorious god's pantheon and exterminated it, he was able to free himself to assist Tsing Hui, who was already in a precarious situation, in blocking the glorious god. After Yin Kongzi tore apart the Divine Kingdom's power, Realm Lord Saint Fan also tore apart a large number of intermediate gods and lower gods of the glorious god's pantheon and joined in the encirclement against the glorious god. On the other side, as the Apocalypse King was facing more intermediate gods at the same time, He hadn't completely defeated them yet. However, if this trend continued, it was only a matter of time before these intermediate gods and lower gods were all killed. The situation was hopeless. The glorious god looked at the pantheon's collapsing pantheon with a trace of pain in his eyes. However, he ultimately didn't do as he said he would. Seeing that things weren't going his way, he abruptly withdrew from the encirclement of Tsing Hui In Kongzi and Realm Lord Saint Fan. He rapidly retracted his divine kingdom's power, abandoning the other members of the pantheon and pouncing on the other two higher gods. Dao To Dong Neil, let's go. You want to leave? Stop them. Tsing Hui's body turned and his great Dao's precepts immediately changed. He directly transformed into a chaos divine beast that was several times larger than the divine beast Kunpeng. He then opened his huge mouth, intending to swallow the glorious god, Ao Tua, and Dong Neil into his body. Although the chaos divine beast Tsing Hui transformed into wouldn't be able to trap the three higher gods for long, it was foreseeable that once they were swallowed by Tsing Hui's chaos divine beast, the others would have the opportunity to defeat them one by one. Only death would await them. Great Divine King, the two of us are willing to cover your rear and resist the enemy's attack. Divine King, we can fall, but the glory of the great Divine King must never dim. As long as the Divine King is still alive, the glory of our pantheon will eventually shine again. Now is the time for us to sacrifice our lives for the Divine King. Great Divine King, please give us this glorious opportunity. The two higher gods called out at the same time and made their final decision. They actually chose to sacrifice themselves without hesitation to give the glorious god a chance at survival. The glorious god also understood that if they were to be delayed by Tsing Hui's chaos divine beast devouring them, they probably wouldn't be able to leave even if they wanted to. It was better to cut off their losses. Even if they would have to sacrifice two higher gods that they had nurtured for countless years, they would still be able to preserve their own lives. As long as they were alive, they would eventually be able to rebuild the glorious pantheon. The glorious god immediately leapt up without hesitation. The glorious pantheon will forever remember the contributions you two have made to the pantheon. Rumble. The two higher gods had satisfied looks on their faces as they unhesitatingly collided with Tsing Hui's chaos divine beast form. The higher god Dong Neil even began to ignite his own divine kingdom. It wasn't just him. Most of the lower gods and mid-gods around him didn't show any signs of fear, nor did they resent being abandoned. Instead, they began to ignite themselves without any complaints, contributing all the power they could to unleash a fatal blow. For a moment, even though Tsing Hui had a total of 6 higher gods on his side, their battle prowess clearly greater than that of the glorious gods' pantheon, they were still thrown into confusion by the higher gods who had ignited themselves and launched a desperate counterattack. Quite a few of them even suffered light injuries in a moment of carelessness. The chaos divine beast that Tsing Hui had transformed into was mostly destroyed by Dong Neil's ignited divine kingdom. If not for the fact that his chaos divine beast was an imitation of the characteristics of a chaos life form, just this attack alone would have been enough to injure him severely. If he didn't rely on external help to recuperate, he wouldn't have been able to recover even after thousands of years. Religious fanaticism. That's why we can't be bothered to take the initiative to look for trouble with the master of God's pantheon. The Apocalypse King said rather gloomily. The other higher gods were more or less the same. However, their main purpose was to assist Tsing Hui in killing the glorious god. Tsing Hui was the main attacker, so even though they didn't manage to kill the glorious god in the end and couldn't exchange for a creation artifact, they didn't look too upset. Compared to agreeing to Tsing Hui's request, they could be considered to have done their best. As for risking their lives to intercept the glorious god, that wasn't within their scope of consideration. Chapter 895. The battle soon came to an end. Although the final result was not satisfactory, as they did not manage to kill Brilliant God, they were able to defeat Brilliant God's pantheon and resolve the crisis of the immortal civilization. This was equivalent to completing Tsing Hui's mission. Furthermore, under Tsing Hui's deliberate actions, they had also captured Ao Tua alive. Ao Tua was just an ordinary high god. Now that his divine kingdom had been destroyed by Tsing Hui and the others, and his cultivation had been sealed by the Saint Fan Realm Lord, who was proficient in the art of sealing. Even if he wanted to burn himself, he would not be able to fight back. Apart from this high god, Tsing Hui, with the help of Yin Kongzi, Dao Lady Clearwater, and the others, had also captured 4 mid-gods, over 100 lower gods and true gods. Through these gods, Tsing Hui already had the foundation to study the formation of the Master of Gods pantheon. Sword God Tsing Hui wants to study the pantheon of the Master of Gods pantheon? After learning of Tsing Hui's plan, Yin Kongzi cautioned, this is no small matter. The pantheon of the Master of Gods pantheon is mainly due to their form of existence. Although the gods themselves can be called living beings, they are, in some ways, a collective of spiritual matter. Every main god is a special existence formed by the will of many gods. Although the main god of a pantheon possesses great power, he will be affected by the power of the pantheon, and even his own will be changed. Once upon a time, a great master of our pantheon imitated the method of the Master of Gods pantheon to recruit true gods, lower gods, and mid-gods to form a pantheon. In the end, he began to doubt himself, and the path he formed collapsed under the impact of the combined will of many true gods, lower gods, and mid-gods, and he died tragically. Realm Master Saint Fan chimed in, the cultivation system of the Master of Gods pantheon is too disruptive. Rather than a cultivator, the master of a pantheon is more like a leader chosen by a group of interests. In the words of the mortal world, the great masters of the Master of Chaos pantheon are equivalent to the emperor of a country, and all the power is in their hands. The master of the pantheon of the Master of Gods pantheon is equivalent to the president of a federal country. Although he has great power, he will be restricted by various parties. Sword God Tsing Hui, study the characteristics of the pantheon of the Master of Gods pantheon and find out their weaknesses. If you try to do it yourself, the consequences will be disastrous. Tsing Hui nodded after hearing the warnings of Realm Master Saint Fan and Yin Kongzi. Don't worry, I won't do anything rash. I'm just curious about the pantheon of the Master of Gods pantheon. Once I understand what's going on, I'll stop. That's good. Sword God Tsing Hui, if you're really curious about this, why don't you go to the Wuji Library in the vast great world to read about it? There are several floors of information about the Master of Gods pantheon in the Wuji Library. The Apocalypse King smiled. Tsing Hui made a note of this. The group did not stay any longer and returned to the territory of the Master of Chaos. Some of them chose to return to the great world they were stationed in, while others chose to return to the Great Development Gate. Tsing Hui and Lord Clearwater once again headed to the vast great world. On the way to the vast great world, Tsing Hui began to study the superior god Otto and the middle gods and lower gods that he had captured. Yin Kongzi, Realm Master Saint Fan, and the others were wary of the power of the pantheon of the Master of Gods. However, Tsing Hui was a being of chaos, and he did not think that he would be affected by the pantheon's power, which would affect the operation of his great Tao. Even so, he was still extremely cautious about the power of the Master of Gods pantheon. 6 years later, Tsing Hui and Lord Clearwater once again appeared in the vast great world. After arriving in the vast great world, Tsing Hui, who had some gains, once again plunged into the Wuji Library. He found many books about the Master of Gods pantheon and began to read them. This time, 3 years had passed. Regarding this, Waterlord Qingshui was naturally calm. As a great medium, he did not have any concept of a few years or a dozen years. Since they had an infinite lifespan, they might have to wait for thousands or even tens of thousands of years before they felt that it was a little longer. The pantheon of the Master of Gods pantheon is indeed very useful to me. I originally planned to reconstruct the 3,000 Great Tao. However, according to the Lord of Myriad Treasures, the current Great Tao nomological laws are already incomplete. It's unknown if there are even 1,000 Great Tao left, let alone 3,000 Great Tao. If I really want to recreate the immortal Tao civilization, I can only rely on other methods. The pantheon is the best choice. Tsing Hui could not help but think of the 49 great derivation sword qi that he had cultivated when he was in the divine realm. There was a saying in the immortal Tao civilization that there were 3,000 great Tao. However, there was also a saying that there were 50 great Tao, and 49 had escaped. It was not difficult to gather all 3,000 great Tao, but it was not difficult to gather all 49 great Tao. As for the escaped one, Tsing Hui thought of his coalescence great Tao. He had used the coalescence great Tao to complete all 50 great Tao and recreate the heavenly Tao world. 49 great Tao. The great Tao nomological laws were severely incomplete. There were only 81 complete great Tao left. The Master of Gods had once tried to condense all 3,000 great Tao and recreate the immortal Tao civilization to obtain the inheritance of the immortal Tao civilization and trace the footsteps of the eternal plate. Unfortunately, his plan had failed. A failed plan was naturally no longer worthy of his attention. In the end, he had handed the 89 complete great Tao and those incomplete great Tao to his most profitable opponent, the glorious Sun Divinity. In other words, if he wanted to obtain all 49 complete great Tao nomological laws in one go, he could steal them directly from the glorious Sun Divinity. However, unlike the glorious Sun Divinity whom he could easily snipe and almost kill, the glorious Sun Divinity was the right-hand man of the Master of Gods. Not only did he receive the Master of God's attention from time to time, but he was also a supreme ultimate God himself. In other words, even if Tsing Hui himself was a supreme ultimate divine ability master and could recruit several supreme ultimate divine ability masters to act with him, if he attacked the glorious Sun Divinity by force, he would end up in an extremely miserable state. This was because the glorious Sun Divinity, who had been infused with the Master of Gods, could summon the Master of Gods to descend. At that time, even if it was just an ordinary incarnation, it could easily defeat the so-called Supreme Ultimate Divine Ability Masters. I can't kill and plunder by force, I can only use my wits. Moreover, the process of doing so has to be extremely careful. This is because, if I'm not careful, this matter will attract the attention of the Master of Gods, and once the Master of Gods has his eyes on me, Tsing Hui could not help but shudder when he thought of the consequences. The Master of Gods was a terrifying existence at the pinnacle. A casual incarnation of the Master of Gods had the invincible power to crush a great divine ability master. Currently, there was no one in the world who had the ability to compete with the incarnation of the Master of Gods. Currently, the only person known to have escaped from the incarnation of the Master of Gods was an elder of the Great Development Gate, the supreme ultimate divine ability master known as the Master of Giant Dragon City. However, the Master of Giant Dragon City was able to escape at that time because the Master of Gods had casually sent down an incarnation. Not long after, there was a seven-vein elder in the Great Development Gate who was at the same level as the Master of Giant Dragon City who also attracted the attention of the Master of Gods and sent down an incarnation. It was the same incarnation, but this incarnation was more than 10 times stronger than the one sent by the Master of Giant Dragon City. This seven-vein elder did not even have the strength to resist and was directly crushed into ashes. This was the terror of a pinnacle existence. Even if 99% of their energy was used to fight against the evil gods who were eyeing covetously, even if they only used 1% of their strength, or even one incarnation of that 1% of their strength, killing the so-called Supreme Ultimate Divine Ability Master was still as easy as crushing an ant. Sneaking into the glorious Sun Deity's God Kingdom is the best way. Fortunately, according to a piece of information that I accidentally obtained, it seems that there is a way to sneak into the glorious Sun Deity's God Kingdom. Tsing Hui's gaze fell on a treasure in his hand. The ancient divine world. He had obtained the ancient divine world from the true Sun Great World. Over the years, Tsing Hui had accidentally discovered that the ancient overgod was actually a descendant of a superior god under the glorious Sun Deity. That superior god was very close to the glorious Sun Deity, but unfortunately, he had fallen in a great battle and had no choice but to entrust his only son, the ancient overgod, to the glorious Sun Deity. The glorious Sun Deity had also directly assigned a god system to the ancient overgod. This allowed the ancient overgod to become the master of a god system at the level of a middle god. Moreover, the glorious Sun Deity had provided a quota for the god kingdom to receive the blessings of the Master of Gods. This allowed the ancient divine world to have the ability to interfere with the power of the Master of Chaos. This information could only be read by an 8th Order card, and those who could obtain an 8th Order card were either rulers of great origins who had made great contributions to the vast world, or famous great mediums. Such figures would not understand such details at all. Furthermore, it had only been 4,000 years since the ancient One-Over-God had fallen in the true Sun Great World. The time was far too short, and the news had yet to spread completely, which was why Ching Su was able to take advantage of it. After obtaining the inheritance of the ancient Overgod, I will use the identity of the ancient Overgod to sneak into the glorious Sun Deity's territory and obtain the complete precepts of the Great Tao. I don't need much, just 49 precepts will be enough for me to complete the second step of the cultivation of the Great Tao Plate. Xing Hui made a prompt decision. He quickly left the vast world with Tao Lord Qing Shui and headed straight for the true Sun Great World. In just a few years, the two of them appeared outside the true Sun Great World. Stepping into the true Sun Great World, he directly transmitted his divine thought to Supreme Martial Artist and Supreme Flame River. The two Supreme Martial Artists had already heard the news from the Void Sword Pavilion that Xing Hui had become a great divine. Faced with his summons, they did not dare to delay at all. They appeared in front of Xing Hui as quickly as possible and bowed respectfully. Greetings to the great sword god Xing Hui. Well, I summoned you this time to collect all the fragments of the ancient divine world as quickly as possible. Supreme Martial Artist and Supreme Flame River did not dare to disobey and bowed at the same time. As they spoke, the two of them quickly left. Seeing the two Supreme Martial Artists leave, Xing Hui could not help but think of the appearance when he had obtained the first fragment of the ancient divine world. At that time, he thought that if he could obtain a few more fragments of the ancient divine world, he would be able to kill the divine real body and the reigning realm cultivators. Unfortunately, at that time, the fragments of the ancient divine world were in the hands of the many one-thought realm cultivators and even the Supreme Martial Artists. But now, with his command, Supreme Martial Artist and Supreme Flame River had already mobilized all their forces to collect the fragments for him. He did not need to spend too much effort at all. This was the change brought about by the elevation of his status. Chapter 896. In less than half a month, Honorable Zhen Wu and Honorable Yen He had already gathered almost all of the fragments of the ancient divine world that were scattered outside. The reason why it was almost, it originated from Honorable Qiyang of the Qiyang Empire. Honorable Qiyang had been severely injured during the invasion of the True Sun Great World 1,000 years ago and had no choice but to flee the True Sun Great World to seek help from the Great Sun God Temple. However, as Xing Hui entered the Divine Wilderness Great World and left a Great Tao imprint outside the Divine Wilderness Great World, even though the Great Tao imprint could not intimidate the true Great Divines, it was enough to make the Great Sun God Temple, which only had a sovereign, not dare to make a move easily. Under such circumstances, Honorable Qiyang did not even dare to return to the True Sun Great World, let alone invade the Divine Wilderness Great World. He could only take up an ordinary position in the Great Sun God Temple. Whether it was power, or influence, it could not be compared to when he was in the True Sun Great World. However, when he left the True Sun Great World, he also took away a part of the inheritance treasure of the True Sun Great World, which was the last fragment of the ancient divine world. Xing Hui could not help but be speechless after hearing this news. We have to make another trip to the Great Sun God Temple. Xing Hui said, Make a trip to the Great Sun God Temple? Honorable Tao Immortal Qing Shui laughed. What is the Great Sun God Temple? How can they be qualified for us to visit them personally? Sword God Xing Hui, you are underestimating the title of Great Divines. If Sword God Xing Hui trusts me, I will directly send a message to the Great Sun God Temple Master and ask him to escort Honorable Qiyang to you to ask for forgiveness. How about that? Xing Hui was slightly stunned when he heard this. He also did not want to make another trip to the Great Sun God Temple. Although the Great Sun God Temple was not far from the True Sun Great World, a round trip would take at least 1 or 2 years. Rather than that, he might as well tidy up the matters of the divine wilderness great world while waiting for the great sun god temple master to bring honorable Qiyang to him. Thinking of this, he directly said, "If that's the case, I'll have to trouble Dao Lord Clearwater to handle this matter. I'll make a trip to the divine wilderness great world. When the people of the Great Sun Divine Hall have escorted Red Sun Sovereign here, I'll return to the true Sun Great World." How can this be considered a problem? Sword God Tsing Hui, I think you should really take in some followers. The followers I'm talking about are not the native cultivators of your divine wilderness great world. With your status as a great divine ability expert, there should at least be some sovereigns who have cultivated the Chaos Yuan sacred body among your followers, right? In my opinion, the Void Sword Pavilion is a good choice. Although the Void Sword Pavilion has a good reputation, and the combat capability of the entire Void Sword Pavilion is enough to compete with ordinary Great Divines, you are not an ordinary Great Divines. You might as well try to subdue the Void Sword Pavilion. If you can get the Void Sword Pavilion to work for you, it will be much easier for you to do anything in the future. Dao Lord Qingshui suggested with a smile. Void Sword Pavilion. Because of his relationship with Bai Shuiying and his communication with the Lihe Sword Master, he was familiar with the Void Sword Pavilion. He wanted to take the Void Sword Pavilion as his disciple, but Tsing Hui pondered for a while and said, "The Void Sword Pavilion is not weak." I remember hearing that a great divine ability expert wanted to take the Void Sword Pavilion as his disciple, but was rejected by the Void Sword Pavilion. Right now, although I have some achievements, I am still a little short of the level to be able to get the Void Sword Pavilion to work for me. I guess I have to wait until I get the Four-Vein Deacon status in the Great Development Sect to have hope. Dao Lord Qingshui shrugged, "Then you can only choose other forces. Do you want me to introduce a few to you? Although those forces are not as famous as the Void Sword Pavilion, there are still one or two sovereigns who have cultivated the Chaos Yuan sacred body. As for the sovereigns at the first level of the chaotic realm, there are hundreds of them. With these people, you don't have to rely on yourself to do everything. Fighting alone is a waste of precious cultivation time." "Thank you for your kindness, but I'll take another look," Tsing Hui said. He had a lot of secrets. If he rashly accepted some untrustworthy forces, it might cause trouble. Therefore, for the sake of safety, he had to be careful. "I'll leave things here to you. Strictly speaking, the true Sun Great World is the bridgehead of the divine wilderness Great World. If possible, I hope you can set up some means around the periphery of the true Sun Great World to deter the cultivators who have designs on the true Sun Great World." Set up some means? Then only the Mark of the Great Way. However, the Mark of the Great Way has no practical effect. It can only deter the opponent. Moreover, the more marks of the Great Way you set up, the weaker the deterrent effect. We have already left marks of the Great Way in the divine wilderness Great World. I don't think it's necessary to set up another mark of the Great Way in the true Sun Great World. As Dao Lord Qingshui spoke, she pondered for a moment and said, "Why don't I leave some trigger restrictions in the true Sun Great World? These restrictions aren't very powerful and won't have any effect on us, but they'll still be effective in stopping those rulers who have cultivated the mixed Yuan sacred body." "Okay, thank you. It's a small matter." Tsing Hui nodded to Dao Lord Qingshui and directly entered the teleportation array between the true Sun Great World and the divine wilderness Great World, returning to the divine wilderness Great World. As he had just returned from the small world of the Grand Development Gate not long ago, he immediately noticed the barrenness of the divine wilderness Great World when he came back. He sighed inwardly. The grade of the world really determines the upper limit of the world's development. Even with my continuous help, it's just pulling up seedlings to help them grow. If I want the divine wilderness Great World to truly step into glory, the only way is to restore the entire Great World. The cultivators of the Master of Chaos were proficient in destruction. Their means in other aspects were not worth mentioning at all. To have a great divine ability expert destroy the divine wilderness Great World did not require much strength, but to have him repair a great world, it would probably take hundreds or thousands of years. I'll use the identity of the Ancient One to sneak into the divine system of the glorious Sun Sovereign to get close to the place where the great Tao Law is stored. I'm afraid it will take some time. During this time, it's not good for Tao Lord Qingshui to follow me. I'll let him restore the divine wilderness great world. As long as the divine wilderness great world can be restored, even without my help in the future, there will still be many world creation and even chaos realm sovereigns in the world. Sing Hui thought to himself as he arrived at the mountain gate of the Hunyuan Sword Sect. Since the crisis of the divine wilderness great world had been resolved, the Hunyuan Sword Sect was naturally re-established. With Sing Hui, a powerful expert, as the nominal supreme elder, the Hunyuan Sword Sect had become the #1 sect in the divine wilderness great world. In the entire Hunyuan Sword Sect, there were not only Firmament and Zhu Zhao, two top experts in the world creation realm, but also several experts in the unrivaled realm and hundreds of cultivators in the divine true body realm. It truly had the atmosphere of a top force. To be able to achieve such an achievement, the secret assistance of the Void Sword Pavilion in order to show goodwill to Tsing Hui could not go unnoticed. Otherwise, even if Firmament and Zhu Zhao had treasures like the Originator, they might not be able to condense a small world in 1,000 years and step into the world creation realm. Compared to the achievements of Firmament and Zhu Zhao, the others lacked the treasure of the Originator. Even with the help of the Void Sword Pavilion, the speed of their progress was still not significant. Among the many elders, only 6 were in the realm of traversing. Most of the rest were in the divine real body realm. Some of the elders had even been caught up by the genius disciples of the new generation. Some of them had even reached the divine real body realm in the same realm as them, which made the old elders feel ashamed. Sing Hui arrived at the Hunyuan Sword Sect and felt the thriving scale of development of the Hunyuan Sword Sect. He was quite pleased. After looking around the Hunyuan Sword Sect for a while, he was surprised to find that it was the time of the Centennial Sect competition of the Hunyuan Sword Sect. Moreover, it was the second day of the sect competition. This is interesting. I originally planned to recruit 3,000 genuine immortals from the Immortal Path civilization and let them cultivate the 3,000 great ways, but now it seems that it's obviously not necessary. Moreover, if everything goes well, the same can be said for the 49 complete great ways. As for the smelting of the bloodlines of the 12 divine beasts, I can consider it. If I don't give them the great path of unification and let them use it as a foundation, I wonder if they can smelt the bloodline laws of the 12 divine beasts into the great path of unification. Sing Hui faintly had an idea. Although he had not yet completed the second step of the great path disc cultivation method, this did not prevent him from finding people to try the third step of the great path disc cultivation method in advance. These people were naturally able to cultivate to this extent because of their opportunities. Sing Hui could also use their cultivation to accumulate some experience in the third step of the Great Path Disc. If the cultivation failed, it was not a big deal. At most, he would give them some resources when the time came. Thinking of this, Sing Hui's figure flashed and directly appeared in the study of the Firmament Master. It was only the second day of the Hunyuan Sword Sect competition. As the sect master of the Hunyuan Sword Sect, the Firmament Master naturally would not be present in person. At this moment, he was still calculating the distribution of resources among the various factions of the Hunyuan Sword Sect. Although the Hunyuan Sword Sect was now the #1 sect in the Divine Wilderness Great World, it was still composed of the Rainbow Sword Sect, the Black Flame Sect, the Illuminating Era Sect, the Firmament Sect, the Sword Shadow Sect, and other factions. It was naturally divided into factions. As the sect master, it was not easy for him to be impartial. Sing Hui's arrival was silent. However, as his figure appeared, the shadow cast by him attracted the attention of the Firmament Master. The Firmament Master raised his head in surprise. After seeing Sing Hui's appearance clearly, a look of pleasant surprise appeared on his face. "Sing Hui, you're back? Greetings to the Great Elder." Sing Hui saw the change in the Firmament Master's attitude. The Firmament Master even bowed to him cautiously. He waved his hand to stop the Firmament Master from bowing. "Master, you don't have to be so polite. Just act like before." No matter what achievements I have in the future, I am still a member of the Firmament sect. This cannot be changed. A faint smile appeared on the Firmament Master's face when he heard this. However, he still did not dare to be as relaxed as before. A great divine ability. What kind of great existence was that? Among the myriad of worlds, it was second only to the Supreme Master of Chaos. In the face of such a great figure, the Firmament Master did not dare to treat Xing Hui the same way as before, even though he still had old feelings for him. Seeing this, Xing Hui felt helpless in his heart. However, he could not force it. He could only go straight to the point. When I arrived at the sect, I found that our Hunyuan Sword sect was holding a sect grand competition that is held once in 100 years. Yes. Since 800 years ago, our Hunyuan Sword sect has had a tradition of holding a sect grand competition. According to the age of cultivation, the disciples are divided into 3 levels: under 100 years old, under 1,000 years old, and above 1,000 years old. The winner will be specially trained and even be given a precious treasure. It has been held for 8 years. Very good. This time, the sect grand competition will be postponed for a month. During this month, the scale of the sect grand competition will be expanded. Also, pass down my order. Those who perform well in the sect grand competition will be able to join my sect as my nominal disciple. Chapter 897. Hunyuan Sword Sect. The number 1 sect in the Divine Wilderness Great World. Although there were foreign forces such as the Void Sword Pavilion in the Divine Wilderness Great World, the main purpose of the Void Sword Pavilion was to deter other forces. Most of the time, it was in a state of seclusion, so ordinary people and even cultivators of the Longevity Realm could not come into contact with the level of the Void Sword Pavilion. Under such circumstances, the power of the Hunyuan Sword sect had completely covered the entire Divine Wilderness Great World. Previously, the Xuanji Palace, Annihilation Sect, 6 Sacred Sects, Unique Sect, Natural Sect, Universal Sect, Great Tao Sect, White Rainbow Sword Sect, Pan's Gate, Wind and Thunder Sect, 5 Elements Sect, and other forces were first invaded by the Illusion World, Northernmost World, Taihua Great World, and Yujing Great World. Their vitality was greatly damaged, and even their sects were exterminated. Then, the Hunyuan Sword sect ushered in an unprecedented era of glory, and its power plummeted. In addition, there was news in the Hunyuan Sword sect that Xing Hui was suspected to have become a great medium, which made the light of the Hunyuan Sword sect cover the entire Divine Wilderness Great World, and no other sect could be on par with it. Today, the Hunyuan Sword sect radiated throughout the Divine Wilderness Great World. The remaining sects, such as the Xuanji Palace, Annihilation Sect, 6 Sacred Sects, still existed, but compared to the Hunyuan Sword sect, they were far inferior. In the Hunyuan Sword sect, not counting the Supreme Elder Xing Hui who had become a great medium, and not counting the Chaotic Realm Supreme Sword Master Bai Heng who had joined the Void Sword Pavilion, the Sect Master Firmament alone and the Great Elder Zhuzhao Master had 2 Supreme Masters. The remaining cultivators in the Unrivaled Realm and Divine True Body Realm numbered in the hundreds. As for the surviving forces such as the Xuanji Palace, Annihilation Sect, 6 Sacred Sects, Natural Sect, Wind and Thunder Sect, the strongest was only at the Divine True Body Realm, and there were only a few of them. The weaker sects did not even have a Divine True Body Realm cultivator. In front of the Hunyuan Sword sect, which was at its peak, they were like dim candlelight. Under such circumstances, the centennial sect competition of the Hunyuan Sword sect naturally attracted everyone's attention. But this time, when the Supreme Elder Xing Hui returned and promised that the cultivators who could stand out in the competition would become his disciple, the Divine Wilderness Great World went crazy. Countless cultivators from the Divine Wilderness Great World were scrambling to join the Hunyuan Sword sect and register to participate in the sect tournament. Sect as a sect disciple. Sect disciples sect as. Sect. In fact, even the Void Sword Pavilion had sent the Liha Sword Master to meet Xing Hui in private, hoping that the Void Sword Pavilion and the Hunyuan Sword sect could exchange a group of disciples and absorb the strengths of each other's sections. At the end of the day, didn't they all hope that a disciple of the Void Sword Pavilion would catch the eye of Qing Su and be taken in as a disciple? They just said it in a more euphemistic way. A great divine true body realm cultivator was a top existence in all the heavens. It was completely reasonable for them to be able to climb up to such a great divine true body realm cultivator. Unfortunately, in order to ensure the purity of the inheritance of the Hunyuan Sword sect, Xing Hui rejected all the cultivators outside the Hunyuan Sword sect. He only allowed the cultivators of the Hunyuan Sword sect to participate in this competition. Even the new disciples had to wait until the next competition to be eligible to participate. As soon as this decision was made, there were cries of grief, and at the same time, it accelerated the destruction of other sections. Even if those sects took out the best cultivation methods and resources, they could no longer retain the geniuses of the sections. These geniuses chose to join the Hunyuan Sword sect one after another, making the Hunyuan Sword sect stronger and stronger. According to this trend, even if the Hunyuan Sword sect did not destroy these sects, it was only a matter of time before the inheritance of these sects was destroyed. In this lively atmosphere, the competition of the Hunyuan Sword sect had not yet begun, but it had already attracted the attention of countless people. There were even many top forces of nearby worlds that specially sent representatives into the divine wilderness great world. On the one hand, they wanted to pay homage to the great divine true body realm cultivator who was closest to them. On the other hand, they also hoped to be on good terms with the Hunyuan Sword sect, lest one day the Hunyuan Sword sect plan to expand and bring an inevitable disaster to them. Xing Hui did not care about the details. After handing over the matters of the competition to the Firmament Master, Xing Hui summoned his two true disciples, Su Yuan and Ji Yun. Due to the fact that Su Yuan had received a strand of Xing Hui's divine sense to supplement his divine soul, his performance over the years had been extremely outstanding. In addition, as Xing Hui's disciple, he had received the best cultivation resources. Today, he had already cultivated to the divine true body realm. Among the many disciples of the Hunyuan Sword sect, he was absolutely outstanding. However, compared to Su Yuan, what really surprised Xing Hui was the disciple he had taken in on the Fortune continent, Ji Yun. Ji Yun had an extremely high talent in Sword Dao. Later, he was introduced into the Ultimate Sword Dao by Xing Hui. His current cultivation had already reached the pinnacle of the Ultimate Sword Dao, which was the vacuum-shattering realm. This was the ultimate realm of the Ultimate Sword Dao that Xing Hui had created back then. However, Xing Hui sensed that after Jiyun cultivated the Ultimate Sword Dao to the vacuum-shattering realm, he actually had a faint tendency to overtake the old and surpass the old. Since then, he had gradually created the fourth realm of the vacuum-shattering realm. This was a special stage of transforming one's body into a sword and refining one's own body as a peerless divine sword. Ordinary cultivators cultivated the divine true body, but he cultivated the divine sword body. In a mountain range that had been reinforced by layers of formations, Xing Hui looked at Ji Yun, who was displaying the tyrannical power of his divine sword body to his heart's content. His eyes were filled with amazement. A moment later, he waved his hand and a figure appeared beside him. "Father!" The figure that reappeared was the Scarlet Abyss Sword Spirit, who had transformed into a human. For thousands of years, under the relentless erosion and enhancement of his great Tao laws, the Scarlet Abyss Sword Spirit's combat strength had also constantly increased. Although it had yet to reach the level of a great divine ability, its combat strength was already not inferior to a ruler who had cultivated the Chaos Origin's sacred body. Scarlet Abyss, suppress your cultivation to the divine true body realm and have a good competition with my disciple, Ji Yun. Xing Hui instructed. From this, it was not difficult to see that he already had the intention of truly treating Ji Yun as his disciple. In fact, if Ji Yun's performance was extremely outstanding, he would even have the thought of letting him inherit his mantle. Of course, his cultivation path itself was entrusted to the creation divine Jade. Even if Ji Yun became his successor, his future achievements would be far inferior to Xing Hui's own. But the great Tao of Unity was different. His great Tao of Unity could be passed down to anyone and leave behind his own great Tao of Unity legacy. Yes. The Scarlet Abyss Sword Spirit, who had received the order, responded respectfully. With a flash, he had already appeared on the battlefield. At the same time, his aura was constantly restrained. In an instant, he had shrunk to the same level as Ji Yun, the divine true body realm. Please. Please. Ji Yun replied with a serious expression. He did not wield a sword, but his body turned into a sword. Every part of his body was equivalent to a peerless divine weapon. The rampaging sword chi could even shoot out from every orifice on his body. Xing Hui looked at Yi Yun, who was fighting with the Scarlet Abyss Sword Spirit, thoughtfully. Ji Yun's path reminded him of a phenomenon that he had mentioned to Water Lord Qingshui not long ago. An exclusive creation divine artifact. An exclusive creation divine artifact that was tailor-made by the Master of Chaos through great contributions. In order to truly unleash the power of an exclusive creation divine artifact, one had to let their great Tao completely conform to this creation divine artifact. In other words, when a cultivator really possessed an exclusive creation divine artifact that was tailor-made for them, they could no longer be called a true human form. Instead, they were equivalent to the weapon spirit of the creation divine artifact, or the energy provider. The direction that Ji Yun was showing vaguely made Xing Hui have this idea. Creation divine artifact. According to the books that I read in the infinite library of the vast great world, the essence of a creation divine artifact is actually a world created using a special method. The form of this world is more advanced than ordinary small worlds. In a pictographic sense, this world should be a miniature chaotic universe. The cultivator resonates with this chaotic universe through their own great Tao nomological laws, thus possessing the power to destroy heaven and earth with a single strike. Xing Hui pondered. In fact, in the end, it was the difference in the essence of power. Ji Yun is now trying to refine himself into a creation divine artifact. However, although his idea is not bad, the difficulty is too great. Humans are ultimately humans. How difficult is it to evolve into an existence similar to a creation divine artifact? Ji Yun can't do this, but the Scarlet Abyss Sword Spirit might not be able to do so. If the Scarlet Abyss Sword Spirit can evolve according to the method that Ji Yun deduced, when the Scarlet Abyss Sword Spirit is strong enough one day, it can completely devour and refine the power of the creation divine artifact to continuously strengthen itself and become a true creation divine artifact. Xing Hui looked at the Scarlet Abyss Sword and then at Ji Yun. Ji Yun's cultivation was weak, but the cultivation method that he deduced was unique. The ultimate sword Tao that he deduced and perfected allowed Xing Hui to see the opportunity to evolve the Scarlet Abyss Sword Spirit into a creation divine artifact. One had to know that the Scarlet Abyss Sword Spirit was born from his sword intent, and its core was also his great Tao of Unity. If the Scarlet Abyss Sword Spirit could really transform into a creation divine artifact, it would be equivalent to having a custom-made creation divine artifact. Moreover, it was a creation divine artifact that could continuously devour other creation divine artifacts to evolve on its own. When the time came, with the help of the Scarlet Abyss Sword's power, he could completely erupt with combat strength close to that of an extremely powerful divine ability user. Thinking of this, Xing Hui stopped the two of them from fighting and said without hesitation, "Scarlet Abyss, from today onwards, you will follow Ji Yun and learn. You will perfect his self-refined ultimate sword Tao with him. Ji Yun, do your best to deduce according to your thoughts. If there's a chance, I will find a creation divine artifact for you so that you can understand the final form of your technique. I will explain to Venerable Firmament that he will spare no effort to support you if you have any needs while you are deducing the new realm of your ultimate sword Tao." Ji Yun received Xing Hui's approval and replied happily, "Disciple will not let master down and perfect the ultimate sword Tao." Chapter 898. Never underestimate anyone's intelligence. My cultivation base is high, but it only means that my vision, knowledge, experience, and accumulation are greater than ordinary people's. It doesn't mean that my creativity is still above ordinary people's. Sometimes, Even a spark of inspiration from an ordinary person can bring me a huge leap in my cultivation. After handing over all the relevant information about the creation artifact to Jiyun, Tsing-Hui returned to his courtyard and sighed in his heart. At the same time, the miracle that happened to Jiyun made Tsing-Hui even more convinced that he wanted to recruit a group of disciples in name and try to use them as the foundation to condense the 12 divine beasts Tao. Perhaps, this idea would inevitably fail in the end. But what if he succeeded? His investment was not large, but once he succeeded, the benefits he could obtain would save him tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of years of cultivation and accumulation. A month passed quickly. The Hunyuan sword sex competition began in full swing. Compared to before, the number of disciples in this competition was more than 10 times that of the previous competitions. Among the tens of millions of disciples in the entire Hunyuan sword sect, there were nearly 1 million who signed up. In addition to the disciples, the cultivators of the deacons and elders also participated in the competition of the 1,000-year-old stage, hoping to stand out in the competition and be valued by Tsing-Hui. Although many of these deacons and elders had cultivated longer than Tsing-Hui, there was no seniority in learning, and the one who reached the top was the teacher. In the face of becoming a disciple of a great master, even if it was just the hope of becoming a disciple in name, these people still did not hesitate to throw caution to the wind. The current divine wilderness great world was no longer as closed as it was 1,000 years ago. For 1,000 years, the divine wilderness great world had not only interacted with the Void Sword Pavilion, but also with some reputable chambers of commerce and forces. And the more they interacted with these forces, the more they understood the importance of a great master. This was a great opportunity to soar to the sky. Time passed. Nearly 1 million disciples and nearly 100,000 deacons and elders signed up, and the number kept decreasing after layers of selection. By the time the competition, which attracted the attention of countless people, reached the final stage and the final 100 disciples were decided, another month had passed. After a month of rest and recuperation, the final battle finally began. On the day of the final battle, not only did Master Firmament, the sect master of the Hunyuan sword sect, appear, but even Qing Su, a great master who was regarded as a legend by countless cultivators of the divine wilderness great world, appeared. His appearance caused countless cultivators in the Hunyuan sword sect to cheer. The entire Hunyuan sword sect seemed to be in an uproar at this moment. A powerful expert. A small Hunyuan sword sect actually has a powerful expert overseeing it. I really don't know what kind of opportunity this Hunyuan sword sect had in the divine wilderness great world for the heavens to let such a peerless genius be born in the divine wilderness great world. Some of the cultivators from outside the divine wilderness great world, including those at the sovereign realm, looked at Tsing-Hui as he descended from the void and sat on the main seat. Their eyes were filled with envy. Great divine ability user. I finally saw a true great divine ability user. Oh my God, is that the true body of a great divine ability user? On him, I saw countless mysteries of space. He seems to be the embodiment of the great Tao of space. A world with a thought expert who also cultivated the Kuanpeng bloodline could not help but exclaim. His face was filled with excitement. In particular, another expert whose cultivation seemed to have reached the critical point of the great Tao of space was suddenly stunned when he saw Tsing-Hui, the natural fluctuations of the great Tao of space emitted from his body. The next moment, he ignored the chaotic and lively environment in front of him and directly sat down cross-legged. After the aura on his body rose and fell, it quickly soared into the sky, causing a violent change in space. Breakthrough. This was a breakthrough. And it was a breakthrough from the world creation realm to the chaotic realm. This scene of reaching the heavens in a single bound caused countless people to go crazy and envy. If it were not for the fact that several sword masters and dozens of sword masters from the Void Sword Pavilion were here to maintain order, the atmosphere would have become even more frenzied. A great divine ability user is the embodiment of the great Tao. Facing a great divine ability user is equivalent to facing the great Tao of space. Cultivators at the Void Transformation realm and the Void Shattering realm are not that difficult to comprehend. Great existences like the Great Divine Ability user can only be given a heart of the world, and it is enough for them to comprehend. But for those at the world creation realm, facing a Great Divine Ability user like Tsing Hui is equivalent to gaining an opportunity to become a sovereign. Even if this opportunity is not obvious, as long as they grasp it, they can still reach the heavens in a single bound. The plucking Shadow Sword Master looked at Tsing Hui in the direction of the Hunyuan Sword Sect, his expression full of respect and shock. The respect was naturally for great existences like the Great Divine Ability user. As for the shock, it was shock that there was someone who could climb from an ordinary person to the peak of the cultivation path in just over 1,000 years. Even though the plucking Shadow Sword Master had already prepared himself for this, but when he thought of the appearance of Tsing Hui when he first saw him, and then looked at the current Tsing Hui who had transformed himself into Tao and was emitting boundless pressure, he still felt a sense of suffocation. A genius and an ordinary person, there was no comparison in front of you at all. Under everyone's gaze, the Hunyuan Sword Sect's grand competition was carried out in an orderly manner. At this moment, those who were sitting beside Tsing Hui were naturally the Firmament Master, the Jinjin Master, and the Liha Sword Master and the Clear Sky Sword Master of the Void Sword Pavilion. Other than these people, the Liha Sword Master and the Clear Sky Sword Master of the Void Sword Pavilion were also beside him. As for the rest of the people, they were either a distance away or did not have enough status. Sword God Tsing Hui, I wonder if you are satisfied with any of the 100 selected disciples? The Liha Sword Master asked with a smile. Tsing Hui glanced at the Liha Sword Master and asked, "Did Bai Shuang not come?" The Liha Sword Master looked a little embarrassed. However, the Rainbow Sword Master interrupted, "Grand Elder Tsing Hui, that girl Shuang has a strong personality. After learning that you have broken through to the Almighty Realm, she has spent most of the time in seclusion in the past 1,000 years. Although she has reached the Sovereign Realm, she is still unwilling to come out of seclusion, which is why she missed the grand competition of our Hunyuan Sword Sect. Please forgive us, Grand Elder Tsing Hui." Tsing Hui nodded when he heard the Rainbow Sword Master's words. He knew that although Bai Shuang looked very easygoing on the surface, she was a very strong woman in essence. If an ordinary person knew that they had broken through to the Almighty Realm, they might be so desperate that they would stop chasing after them, but Bai Shuang would not do that. This was also the reason why she could stand out from the Void Sword Pavilion in such a short time and break through to the Sovereign Realm. Thinking of Bai Shuang's character, Tsing Hui shook his head and did not say anything more. At this time, there was another burst of exclamations from the crowd. The two people who were originally selected as the seeded contestants had encountered each other in advance. The battle between the two seeded contestants naturally caused countless people to exclaim. The cultivators from the Void Sword Pavilion and other forces did not think much of it, and some even could not stand it. However, there was a lot of cheering within the Hunyuan Sword Sect. The battle gradually came to an end as the big shots like Tsing Hui chatted. With the protection of the Sovereign Realm, the disciples of the Hunyuan Sword Sect who fought with all their strength did not suffer any serious injuries or deaths. Even if they were seriously injured, the sovereigns could heal them immediately. 3 days later, the grand competition finally ended. The top 10 disciples and the top 10 elders and deacons all stood out. In particular, the first disciple and an elder were even more proud. They all stared at Tsing Hui with blazing eyes. Looking at these disciples, Tsing Hui then looked at the Liha Sword Master beside him. Considering the proposal of Lord of Dao Qingshui, he also smiled and said, "I don't know if there are any disciples of the Hunyuan Sword Sect that the Liha Sword Master likes? If you can, you might as well choose 1 or 2 people to enter the Void Sword Pavilion to improve the relationship between our two sections." The Liha Sword Master really wanted to improve the relationship between himself and the Hunyuan Sword Sect. Even if the disciples of the Hunyuan Sword Sect were not qualified to enter his eyes, he still quickly said, "Among these people, there is a good seedling. However, I would still like to ask Sword God Tsing Hui to choose first. It won't be too late for me to choose after Sword God Tsing Hui has chosen a disciple that you are satisfied with." "That's good." Tsing Hui nodded. However, the scope of his selection was not the top 10 people, but the top 100 people. A total of 12 people were selected. Among these 12 people, only 3 of the top 10 were taken. The rest were selected from the other 90 people. Moreover, Xing Hui also announced his real criteria for selection. In a word, he would never give up. If this scene were to happen to other people, it would naturally cause dissatisfaction among the disciples. However, Xing Hui's reputation in the Hunyuan sword sect and even in the entire divine wilderness great world was too high. Although the disciples who were not selected were full of regret, none of them resented him. Instead, they regretted that they did not draw their swords to fight when they encountered an opponent they could not defeat and showed their tenacious courage and fighting spirit. After that, the Liha sword master also chose 2 of these disciples out of courtesy, further improving the relationship between the 2 sections. Although these 2 people's talent was mediocre, they were the people that Xing Hui had asked the Liha sword master to choose. They were destined to be heavily cultivated after entering the Void Sword Pavilion. Perhaps their future achievements would be better than those cultivators who were more talented than them. This scene touched Xing Hui's heart a little. He could decide the future of these disciples with a single word. How could the Master of Chaos not be the same? It must be known that even for the existence of the great divine ability, the luck and other attributes on the Son of Chaos interface still played a role. Previously, he could not understand these luck attributes. Now, it seemed that the Master of Chaos had set up a mechanism with the help of a special divine tool of creation. As long as someone increased their luck attribute, the divine tool of creation would naturally distribute some reasonable opportunities to those lucky people from time to time, allowing them to feel the benefits of the characteristic of luck. After understanding this, Xing Hui could not help but have a deeper understanding of the strength of the Master of Chaos. The characteristics of the Son of Chaos were the best benchmark. Before he could get rid of the influence of the many characteristics of the Son of Chaos, he should never really face the Master of Chaos. Chapter 899. In half a year, Xing Hui gave different pointers to the 12 new disciples and planted the seeds of the great path of unification in each of them. Qing Su had no plans of taking these seeds back. As a matter of fact, he was even prepared to waste them all. As long as they could provide him with some useful data and slightly lower his cultivation of the 3rd layer of the Disc of Ways, he would be satisfied. After doing all this, he returned to the True Sun Great World. At this time, the Great Sun Temple Lord of the True Sun Great World had brought the Emperor of the Crimson Sun Empire to the True Sun Great World to meet Xing Hui. Standing in front of Xing Hui, the Great Sun Temple Lord, who had cultivated the mixed Yuan sacred body, was trembling with fear. Not only did he hand Crimson Sun Prime over to Xing Hui, he also gave him a lot of compensation. Considering that the Crimson Sun Empire had tried to break through the teleportation formation between the True Sun Great World and the Divine Wilderness Great World at the Sky Pass Valley and had placed a chess piece, Eternity, in the Divine Wilderness Great World, Xing Hui did not do anything to Crimson Sun Prime, but he accepted all the compensation from the Great Sun Temple Lord. He believed that after he accepted these compensation items, the Great Sun Temple Lord would definitely take back these losses from Crimson Sun Prime 10 times, no, 100 times. Crimson Sun Prime would also pay the price for coveting the Divine Wilderness Great World. After obtaining the fragment of the Ancient God World, Xing Hui immediately completed the fusion of the Ancient God World. After the fusion of the Ancient God World was completed, he immediately sensed the resonance between the Ancient God World and the True Sun Great World. Less than 10 billion kilometers. After sensing the location of the coordinates, Xing Hui's figure flashed and he stepped out of the True Sun Great World. Then he and Tao Lord Clearwater quickly traversed through the endless void. Those void storms that were extremely dangerous to cultivators below the divine true body stage posed no threat at all to these 2 great masters who had transformed their bodies into Tao. Instead, they were like emperors welcoming the arrival of their monarchs, automatically avoiding them and providing the 2 great masters with a peaceful path forward. It's here. Xing Hui arrived at the space where the Ancient God World was located. Is this where the Ancient Overgod's kingdom is? Lord of Dao Qingshui looked around and said, "The Master of Gods is known for his strange and complicated methods. Although the Ancient One is only an intermediate god, he is the master of a god system. His god kingdom is well hidden. Even though I am standing here, I can't sense the presence of his god kingdom." Xing Hui smiled and said, "The ancient overgod's father is a famous high god. He might even be a divine king or an ultimate god. He has made great contributions to the Master of Gods, which is why his son was able to obtain the blessings of the Master of Gods. A mid-god with such a profound background naturally cannot be treated as an ordinary person." With that, he said to Dao Lord Clearwater, "Dao Lord, please keep watch for me to prevent anyone from disturbing me." "All right." Lord of Dao Qingshui had promised to serve the Qing ruins for 10,000 years. If he was asked to engage in a battle of life and death with extremely powerful enemies during the 10,000 years, he might be reluctant to do so, but he obviously would not turn down such a small matter. After receiving Dao Lord Xing Hui's promise, Xing Hui quickly took out the ancient god world that was formed from the ancient god world. Although the ancient god world was said to be formed from the fragments of the ancient overgod's kingdom, it only represented a part of the ancient overgod's kingdom. It was more like a key that was used to open the ancient overgod's kingdom and obtain his inheritance. As Xing Hui took out the ancient god world, circles of ripples appeared in the void before him. After a while, a space tunnel appeared. Without hesitation, Xing Hui took a step forward and appeared in the space tunnel. Once Xing Hui entered the space tunnel, it closed automatically. At the same time, the entire kingdom began to stir and a destructive aura was faintly emitted. In the middle of the kingdom, a vast, majestic aura rolled over. Even as a great medium, Xing Hui was greatly affected by it. This aura, is it the remaining blessing of the Master of Gods? Xing Hui's heart skipped a beat. In the next moment, the aura on his body began to change gradually. During this period of time, he had studied Ao Tua, who he had captured alive, as well as a series of mid-gods and lower gods. Now, using the characteristics of the chaotic life forms, he easily transformed his aura into that of a mid-god. Waves of divine power were emitted from his body and merged with the aura. In an instant, the aura faded and the ancient god world, which had been stirring, gradually calmed down. Who would have thought that the ancient overgod would have set up a backup plan in his own kingdom? If the Master of Chaos had cultivated the mixed Yuan holy body, in the face of the remaining aura of the Master of Gods, he would not have been able to unleash even 10% of his power. In the end, he would have been killed by the traps set in the ancient god world. If the Master of Gods was a great medium who could withstand the remaining aura of the Master of Gods, the ancient god world would have chosen to self-destruct and use the power of the world to drag the Master of Gods down with it. Xing Hui quickly understood the ancient overgod's sinister intentions from this series of changes. He could tell that the ancient overgod's kingdom was not as simple as a mid-god's kingdom. The level of this kingdom was at the level of an upper god. It was highly likely that the ancient overgod had inherited his father's kingdom. However, the ancient overgod's abilities were limited. Although he had inherited his father's kingdom, he had not been able to refine it. As such, he had been stuck at the level of a mid-god for a long time. It's a pity. I don't have the ancient overgod's bloodline. I can't use the transformation spell to transform into the ancient overgod and inherit this kingdom. However, although I don't have the ancient overgod's bloodline and can't transform into the ancient overgod, the owner of this kingdom has already passed away. The ancient overgod has also passed away. In order to prevent the kingdom from being lost, he deliberately left behind his own inheritance. I just need to study it carefully. It's not impossible for me to fully understand the inheritance of this kingdom and become the owner of this kingdom. Xing Hui sized up the kingdom and his eyes shone brightly. Initially, he had been a little apprehensive about sneaking into the glorious sun god's holy system. He was worried that he might be exposed. However, if he could fully understand this kingdom and refine it, by then he would be a true upper god. As long as he did not expose himself to the Master of Gods, no one would be able to see through his disguise. At this thought, Xing Hui did not even bother to check out the various treasures in this kingdom. He quickly arrived at the core of the kingdom, the Overgod's throne. As he arrived in front of the Overgod's throne, a strand of divine thought was projected from the Overgod's throne. It formed into a figure wearing a plain robe and filled with compassion. To be able to pass my test and come before my throne proves that you are at least a deity of the Master of Gods. It doesn't matter whether you have heard of my name or whether you belong to the Freedom Deity or any other deity. I have to congratulate you. You will receive my inheritance. The ancient Overgod left behind a strand of divine thought? That's great. The master of the holy system is equivalent to an amalgamation of consciousness. Once the holy system is destroyed, the Overgod's consciousness and consciousness will also be affected. Originally, I pretended to be the ancient Overgod and claimed that I had lost some of my memories. However, there are still some hidden dangers in this method. Now that I have the ancient Overgod's divine thought, I will definitely be able to replicate the ancient Overgod's divine thought. As long as I am not targeted by the Master of Gods, I can be considered to be foolproof. Qing Su did not give the ancient Lord God any chance to finish his sentence. With a wave of his hand, the ancient Lord God's remnant consciousness was already in his hand. The power of the Tao of coalescence began to circulate. The divine thought was instantly engulfed and analyzed by the Tao of coalescence. It was then refined into the Tao of coalescence. After carefully sensing the Tao of coalescence's analysis of the ancient Overgod's divine thought, Xing Hui's aura began to change. The power of the Tao of Kunpeng gradually dissipated from his body and was replaced by a brand new Tao. This Tao, it was vaguely related to time. However, the so-called Tao of time was not the real Tao of time. It was a semi-finished Tao of time that was simulated by the Master of Time. It was a type of Tao of time that could be distorted and changed under the influence of gravity. To be exact, this was the gravitational Tao of Time's Tao of Time. The ancient Overgod cultivated the gravitational Tao of time. The Tao of time that created this High God's kingdom also originated from gravitational Tao. Gravitational Tao is actually quite similar to the Tao of space that the Kunpeng represents and the Tao of nothingness that the divine beast Hunpeng represents. It should be much easier for me to understand it. When a middle god breaks through to become a higher god, there will definitely be a significant change in the aura of the body. If I can reappear in the glorious Sun Supreme God's God system as a higher god, even if I am not exactly the same as the ancient Overgod, as long as the aura of my divine thought is not too different, it is completely reasonable. At this thought, Xing Hui immediately sent a divine thought to Water Lord Qingshui and told her that she could go to the divine wilderness Great World or the true Sun Great World to help her guard these two worlds. Meanwhile, he would have to cultivate in seclusion. This was exactly what Water Lord Qingshui wished for. It was easy for a powerful person to cultivate in seclusion for thousands or even tens of thousands of years. If Xing Hui could really cultivate in seclusion for tens of thousands of years, he would be able to skip the agreed time between the two of them and save her a lot of trouble. With this thought in mind, Water Lord Qingshui quickly left. On the other hand, Xing Hui began to refine this High God's kingdom and analyze the gravitational Tao of time. In the blink of an eye, 300 years had passed. With the help of a portion of the Fortune Jade's power, Xing Hui finally completed the refinement of this High God's kingdom after 300 years. As he moved, the vast and empty High God's kingdom began to shrink with him as the center. Soon, it had shrunk to the size of a speck of dust and merged into his body. The divine aura that he exuded was also released without the hindrance of the High God's kingdom. Now, I've barely reached the level of a High God. It's really not easy to study a different system of laws again. It only took me a few years to simulate the divine beast Kunpeng's great Tao law, but it took me 300 years to simulate the gravitational Tao law of the Master of Gods even with the help of the Fortune Jade's great Tao law. Xing Hui sighed. He shook his head and did not waste any more time. Now that he had become a high god with the identity of the Ancient One over God, he had to hurry to the glorious Sun God's divine system and find a way to steal the many great Tao laws left behind by the Master of Gods. The success of this operation was directly related to whether he could quickly complete the second level of the Great Tao Disc cultivation. Chapter 900. Glorious Sun God. One of the strongest ultimate gods under the Master of Gods. Unlike the Master of Chaos, who had many powerful ultimate gods, the Master of Gods was very united and valued by the Master of Gods, even though the number of ultimate gods was far less than the number of ultimate gods under the Master of Gods. Among them, the ultimate gods were even more so. After all, the Master of Chaos was so huge that he did not have to worry about losing too much of his body when he sent down countless incarnations. However, the Master of Gods and the Master of Time were different. Although the consumption of their incarnations was extremely small, they could not completely ignore it like the Master of Chaos. Once their incarnations were lost, it would still have a subtle impact on them. Under normal circumstances, such an impact would not cause any harm. However, if the Master of Gods was at a critical moment when he was fighting with the evil god could see through his weakness and attack him specifically. This would cause the slight loss to continue to expand and eventually decide the outcome of the battle. Under certain circumstances where it was inconvenient to send down incarnations, the ultimate gods could undoubtedly play a big role. That was also the reason why the Master of Gods was so concerned about the life and death of the ultimate gods. Xing Hui's incarnation of the ancient god quickly passed through the Master of Chaos territory and stepped into the Master of Gods territory. Unlike when he set foot in the territory of the Lord of Gods as a cultivator of the Master of Chaos, when Qing Su arrived there as a higher god, he immediately sensed the abnormality of the Lord of Gods territory. The entire domain of the Lord of Gods was like a gigantic and unimaginably complex web. Countless divine wills, consciousnesses, and faith channels filled every corner of the domain. The closer one got to a world or plane with many gods, the denser these divine wills, consciousnesses, and faith channels were. If one encountered a powerful god system, they would be able to see countless divine wills, consciousnesses, and faith intertwined together like a dazzling stream of light that could be seen clearly even from hundreds of millions of kilometers away. This network is the power that maintains the existence of the divine system. Xing Hui stayed outside a high god divine system for a short while. The overgod of this divine system was like an ocean, while the mid-gods, low-gods, and true gods were like rivers, streams, and streams. They continuously gathered their energy into the ocean, causing the ocean to expand and grow all the time. However, it was different from a completely formed sea. The sea represented by the Master of the divine system would reverse the flow of some rivers and streams when they dried up, replenishing these dried-up streams and streams. This formed a special symbiotic relationship between the two, and its ability to resist risks increased exponentially. All rivers flow into the sea. It's no wonder that as long as an ordinary superior god establishes his own god system and becomes a divine king, he'll be at least equivalent to a great divine master. If his god system is slightly developed and has a few superior gods, he'll immediately be able to ascend to the position of ultimate god and be on par with the top great divine masters. If the god system is large enough and has more than 10 superior gods or even close to double digits, a supreme ultimate god will be born. Xing Hui muttered to himself. At this time, he had to rejoice that the glorious divinity had only 2 superior gods and 50 to 60 mid-gods as his subordinate gods. If the number of the glorious divinity's subordinate gods had doubled, with 4 superior gods and more than 100 mid-gods, the outcome of the ambush by the 6 great divine masters would have been completely changed. According to the information obtained, Xing Hui had traveled for more than 30 years and finally appeared outside the divine system of the glorious divinity. The divine system of the glorious divinity was several times larger than that of the glorious divinity. The entire divine system was filled with 11 superior gods, more than 300 mid-gods, hundreds of thousands of lower gods, and even more true gods. Countless divine kingdoms formed worlds. In addition to the planes that were originally created by the Master of Gods, the entire divine system spanned tens of thousands of light years. It should be known that the tens of thousands of light years in front of them were not as empty and vast as the Milky Way, Andromeda Galaxy, large and small Magellan galaxies. The entire divine system was completely constructed by planes. It was equivalent to countless creatures living in each area. If all the creatures within tens of thousands of light-years were to be added up, the number would definitely break through the sky. Even the photon computers of some low-level civilizations would not be able to calculate it. This showed how huge the divine system of the glorious divinity was. Tsing Hui carefully recalled some basic information about the ancient overgod at the periphery of the divine system of the glorious divinity. He then moved towards the divine system of the glorious divinity. Before he could get close to the glorious divinity's pantheon, a powerful divine power quickly came from the pantheon in front of him. Then, he saw a knight in armor riding a divine steed that was emitting white light come from the sky. The knight wore a blood-red cloak and held a knight's spear that was twice his height. He rode a spatial wave and soon appeared in front of Tsing Hui. Tsing Hui immediately recognized the identity of the knight in front of him through the information that he had read in advance. It was one of the 11 superior gods under the glorious divinity, the god of paladins, Genevieve. When he carefully sensed Tsing Hui's body for a moment, he could not help but be surprised. The ancient overgod? Although the ancient overgod was only an intermediate celestial, as the master of a celestial system, he could not be viewed as an ordinary intermediate celestial. Because of this, Genevieve was very familiar with the ancient overgod's aura. Who have metamorphosed into a superior god? 4,000 years ago, your divine system lost contact with us. There were also rumors that your entire divine system was annihilated in the domain of the Master of Chaos. Now it seems that it's true? Tsing Hui said in a deep voice, my entire divine system was defeated. As the overgod, I also suffered an unprecedented injury in that battle. If I had not sensed the opportunity to become a superior god at the critical moment and used the power of my divine kingdom to escape the attack of those powerful beings in the domain of the Master of Chaos, I'm afraid that I would have perished in that battlefield forever. Genevieve said sympathetically, I've also heard about that battle, but you were too deep in the domain of the Master of Chaos. Even the great divine Lord His Majesty did not dare to go to that domain to rescue you and bring you back, let alone me. Therefore, he could only watch as the situation deteriorated. At that point, he paused for a moment. Fortunately, although all of you have sacrificed a lot in the end, the outcome isn't the worst. At the very least, you have perfectly refined the divine kingdom and become a high god. I believe that if your fallen vassal gods were to learn of this news, they would be gratified by your achievements in the underworld. Tsing Hui nodded and tried his best to put himself in the shoes of the ancient overgod. When the time comes, I will find a way to rebuild my divine system. Moreover, I will build an unprecedentedly powerful divine system and use the power of my divine system to kill all the enemies in the domain of the Master of Chaos who destroyed my divine system. I will use their blood and souls to wash away the hatred of my divine system. With your current strength as a superior god and the contributions you have made over the years, I believe that you will definitely become a great divine king, encouraged Genevieve. Genevieve encouraged. Tsing Hui nodded and said, now that I have become a superior god, I'm afraid that I will need the help of His Majesty, the glorious Sun God, to fulfill the duties of a superior god. Therefore, I have come to seek an audience with His Majesty, the glorious Sun God, in the hope that I can receive His help and guidance. Come with me. I believe that His Majesty, the great glorious Sun God, will be very gratified to know that not only did you not perish, but you have also broken through to become a superior god, said Genevieve. As Genevieve said that, he brought Qing Su towards the core divine system of the glorious Sun deity. With his identity as the ancient overgod, Tsing Hui's entry into the core divine system of the glorious Sun God could be said to be extremely smooth. He did not encounter any difficulties. However, as a divine kingdom could not accommodate another divine kingdom, when Tsing Hui's divine kingdom arrived at the periphery of the glorious Sun God's divine kingdom, he could only use his divine energy to create a clone of himself and follow Genevieve into the glorious Sun God's divine kingdom. For any practitioner above the supreme realm, the safest place is their divine kingdom. If I were the glorious sun deity, I would also store the most precious things in my divine kingdom. The Lord of Gods collected the broken great Tao principles of the immortal civilization back then. Although he never did the magnificent feat of regathering the 3,000 great Taos and even abandoned them now, these great Tao principles that are no longer useful to the Lord of Gods are still the most precious wealth to the glorious sun deity. He would definitely keep these great Tao principles in his divine kingdom. When Xing Hui stepped into the glorious sun god's divine kingdom, he was already carefully sensing the great Taos in the divine kingdom. When he was about to enter the palace of the glorious sun god, the creation divine jade in his spiritual world finally vibrated slightly as if it had captured the fluctuations of those great Taos. However, if Xing Hui really used the creation divine jade to draw those great Taos, it would definitely attract the attention of the glorious sun god. At that time, Xing Hui, who was in his divine kingdom, might not be able to escape the pursuit of the glorious sun god. Therefore, even if he had sensed the fluctuations of the great Taos, he still could only suppress the creation divine jade and did not dare to show any abnormalities. I have to make sure the glorious sun god has no time to pay attention to the internal movements of his divine kingdom. Xing Hui quickly thought in his mind. In order to do that, there had to be at least a strong opponent who could make the glorious sun god concentrate and not be distracted. However, the glorious sun god was a supreme ultimate god. In the entire Great Development sect, there were only a few elders and the gate master who were worthy of his attention. With his current wealth, how could he invite these supreme experts? While pondering, Xing Hui had already followed Genevieve to the interior of the divine palace. In the center of the divine palace, the glorious sun god who had received the news was sitting on the throne and waiting for Xing Hui to have an audience. Almost at the same time when Xing Hui saw the glorious sun god, he, who had been thinking hard for a long time, had already derived an extremely bold idea in his mind. Chapter 901. The Master of Chaos, the Master of Gods, and the Master of Time had a common enemy. The immortal Tao civilization was not even on the front line. There was only one opponent that they could treat as an enemy and treat with caution. The evil gods. The creation beings and chaos beings that wandered outside the territory of the immortal Tao civilization were at the same level as the three great existences. Although the evil gods could not compete with the Master of Chaos, the Master of Gods, and the Master of Time individually, they were the real opponents of the three great existences. In addition, there were many of them. Once they appeared in the territories occupied by the three great existences, they would immediately attract the attention of the three great existences, especially the Master of Gods and the Master of Time. Glorious Sun Divinity was the most loyal ultimate god to the Master of Gods. Once he noticed the trace of the evil god, he would definitely go and investigate. The evil god was so powerful that it could easily tear apart a divine kingdom of a supreme ultimate god. Therefore, Glorious Sun Divinity would only send his most powerful incarnation to ensure the safety of the divine kingdom. The more powerful the incarnation, the more energy it required from the cultivator. This gave him the opportunity to steal the great Tao laws. While he was deep in thought, Xing Hui had already arrived in front of the Glorious Sun Hierarch. The Glorious Sun Hierarch was a top-notch supreme ultimate god. As his eyes fell on Xing Hui, a terrifying pressure descended on his body. Even though Xing Hui tried his best to control his great Tao laws, the deeply hidden great Tao of unification was almost revealed by the Glorious Sun Hierarch's invasive and probing gaze. Fortunately, at the critical moment, he transformed his great Tao of unification into the power of the divine kingdom. At the same time, he bowed his head respectfully and said, "The Ancient One, the Superior God, greets the great Glorious Sun Hierarch." The Glorious Sun Divinity studied Qing Su for a long time. Only then did a slight smile appear on his stern face. "Not bad, Ancient One. You were able to turn danger into opportunity and refine your father's divine kingdom to become a powerful superior god. This is a blessing in disguise. If your divine pantheon was destroyed, so be it. Now that you've become a powerful superior god, it won't be difficult for you to rebuild your divine pantheon." In fact, it won't even be long before you'll be crowned king under the protection of many lesser gods and mid-gods, becoming a powerful divine king. Divine king, Xing Hui in the form of the Ancient One replied modestly, "This war has made me deeply aware of my shortcomings. As a superior god, I was caught in an ambush by the enemy due to my lack of understanding of the situation. My entire divine system was destroyed and I almost perished in that disaster. This has made me feel heartache and also made me realize my shortcomings. Compared to the great glorious Sun Hierarch, I am far inferior in both governing and governing the divine system. Therefore, I hope that in the following period of time, I can earnestly request the glorious Sun Hierarch to allow me to stay in your divine kingdom and learn from your experience in managing the divine system so that I can better fulfill my duties as a superior god and contribute my strength when your majesty requires it." Hearing Xing Hui's words of surrender, the glorious Sun Hierarch nodded satisfactorily. In addition to his relationship with Xing Hui's father, he immediately gave an accurate promise. "Very good, Ancient One. The fact that you have such thoughts proves that you have grown considerably over the years. Since you have the heart to learn to be a divine king, as a good friend of your father, I naturally won't refuse. You can stay here and learn from me for a period of time. It won't be too late for you to leave when you feel that you are capable of developing the divine system again. Many thanks to the great glorious Sun Hierarch for granting my wish." Xing Hui replied respectfully. After saying that, he seemed to have thought of something and suddenly said, "By the way, Your Majesty the Divine Lord, I've sensed an unusual power entrenched at the edge of the great Master of Gods near the Master of Chaos bloodline. This power vaguely made me tremble with fear, so I didn't go too close to investigate. I only recorded a trace of that power's aura. In order to prevent that power from causing too much damage to our divine realm, Your Majesty the Divine Lord, please make a decision." "An unusual power? What kind of power?" the glorious Sun Hierarch asked curiously. "Please have a look, Your Majesty." Xing Hui gestured with his hand and simulated the power of the evil god he had sensed from the blood-red statue. The glorious Sun Hierarch was originally indifferent to the power that Xing Hui had presented. However, after carefully sensing the essence of this power, his expression became serious. When he thoroughly recognized this power, his face immediately became serious. "Where did you sense this power?" "In the 634th district, near the edge of the 634th district, near the territory of the Master of Chaos." Xing Hui answered truthfully. "These guys have sneaked in again. This time, let's see where they will run to. As long as we can locate their real bodies through their incarnations in the mortal world, the great Master of Gods will be able to severely injure them or even kill them in one blow." The profit of killing an evil god. The glorious Sun Hierarch's eyes suddenly lit up. At the same time, he turned to Xing Hui with a smile and said, "Ancient One, if the information you have provided is as I have guessed, then you have made a great contribution. If things go well, I will personally ask the great Master of Gods for your reward." "I dare not. I don't even dare to get close to that mysterious power. How can I claim credit? Moreover, although this power is extremely terrifying, it's very subtle and can be described as a fleeting moment. If Your Majesty wants to investigate it, I'm afraid you'll need some patience. At the same time, you'll need to protect yourself." "I understand. You can't be too careful when dealing with such an existence." The glorious Sun Hierarch nodded. Hearing this, Genevieve seemed to think of something and his face changed slightly. "Your Majesty, does that power come from—" The glorious Sun Hierarch nodded slightly at Genevieve. "The Master of God's lineage was different from the Master of Chaos lineage. The Master of God's lineage grew up in a step-by-step manner. Therefore, very few cultivators would choose to believe in an evil god. Knowing that most of the evil gods were of the high god level, the glorious Sun Hierarch did not suspect that the Ancient One could not identify the evil god's aura. Moreover, he had already confirmed the Ancient One's identity and did not think that the Ancient One would dare to deceive him with this matter. This is a matter of great importance. No one knows what those terrifying existences are plotting. For safety's sake, I will bring a few high gods with me. When the time comes, even if our identities are exposed, we will be able to hold on until the Supreme Master of Gods arrives when facing the incarnation of that terrifying existence. Your subordinate is willing to go with your majesty. Genevieve immediately expressed his stance. When Tsinghui saw this, he pretended to hesitate for a moment before stepping forward to ask for instructions. I am also willing to contribute my meager strength to your majesty, the glorious Sun Hierarch. There's no need for that. Ancient One, if the information you provide is true, you will have made a great contribution. When the time comes for you to establish a god system, I will definitely do my best to help you. Now, I will grant you access to the glorious Sun Tower. You can walk through all the areas below the 70th floor of the glorious Sun Tower and read any information for free. Tsinghui had deliberately researched the glorious Sun Hierarch beforehand and naturally understood the importance of the glorious Sun Tower. The tower was the core of the glorious Sun Divinity. Many of the supreme treasures in the glorious Sun Divinity's possession were stored in the tower. As a matter of fact, if Qing Su's guess was correct, the laws should be within the tower as well. He just had no idea how many floors there were. Once he entered this tower, Tsinghui would be infinitely close to the great Tao laws from the immortal civilization. Tsinghui immediately put on a grateful expression. Thank you, Your Majesty, the great glorious Sun Hierarch. Good. The glorious Sun Divinity extended a finger, and a strand of divine force directly landed on Qing Su, who was trying his best to dodge. I've already left my imprint on you. With this imprint, you won't be obstructed in any room below the 70th floor of the glorious Sun Tower. After that, he hurriedly left with Genevieve. Tsinghui sensed the divine power mark on his body. He knew that this divine power mark would allow him to move unimpeded in the divine kingdom of the glorious Sun Hierarch. At the same time, he would be completely monitored by the glorious Sun Hierarch. Even if he escaped to the territory of the Master of Chaos, the glorious Sun Hierarch would still be able to sense his whereabouts through this divine power mark. He is indeed the most powerful ultimate god. Tsinghui carefully sensed the divine power mark for a moment. This divine power mark could be said to be perfectly integrated with his life fluctuations and aura fluctuations. Unless the person marked was dead, there was no conventional way to erase it. What a pity! If I were an ordinary high god, I might not be able to do anything about your imprint. However, my life energy and divine soul energy that belong to the ancient overgod are imitated by the remnant divine consciousness of the real ancient overgod. As long as I modify the frequency that I imitate, I will naturally be able to avoid being marked by this imprint. Lin Li muttered to himself. Tsinghui wore a faint smile on his face. Although the increase in his combat strength after his life essence reached the level of chaos life essence was not great, it had to be said that the passive increase brought by this life essence was completely unique. If it were not for the special advantage of being a chaos life essence, he was afraid that he would fall into a state of powerlessness when dealing with many things. For the next few days, Tsinghui spent his time on the 60th floor of the glorious Sun Hierarch's tower, reading books about the divine system's powers. He appeared to be kind and harmless. After a few days of preparation, the glorious Sun Divinity finally set off. Not only did he create a powerful incarnation, but he was also personally escorted by 4 higher god-level vassal gods to the territory of the Green Ruins where the evil gods were suspected to exist. After the departure of the glorious Sun Hierarch, Tsinghui waited patiently for another month until he was sure that the glorious Sun Hierarch had gone far away and would not be able to devote too much energy to the divine kingdom in a short period of time. It was only then that Tsinghui put down his many affairs and began to plan his escape route. After leaving behind some means that could allow him to quickly leave the divine kingdom of the glorious Sun Hierarch, Tsinghui dared not waste too much time. After concealing his aura to the extreme, he went to the top of the glorious Sun Tower and gradually activated the Fortune Jade. Chapter 902. The Fortune Jade had long sensed the presence of the divine essences and intended to guide them back to perfect the operation mechanism of the Fortune Jade. However, Tsinghui had suppressed the Fortune Jade for a long time. Now that Tsing Hui had released his suppression on the Fortune Jade and actively urged the Fortune Jade to guide the divine essences to him, the effect of 1 + 1 is greater than 2. The many divine essences that were sealed in the Sunglory Tower vibrated at the same time, pounding against the incomplete formation of the Sunglory Tower. Streaks of divine essences shot out in all directions. The divine essences shuttled through the void and entered the Fortune Jade in Tsing Hui's body. Although these divine essences had been abandoned by the Lord of Gods, they were, after all, treasures bestowed by the Lord of Gods to the glorious Sun Divinity. The glorious Sun Divinity attached great importance to the gifts bestowed by the great Lord of Gods. Therefore, when these divine essences were pulled out of the Sunglory Tower, the entire Sunglory Tower burst into endless streams of light that shot straight into the sky and shook the entire Divine Kingdom. Relying on the power of the Divine Kingdom, the Sunglory Tower locked onto Tsing Hui in an instant. At the same time, an angry roar was heard from within the Divine Kingdom. Following that, several deities, who were equivalent to the avatars of superior gods, appeared and reprimanded the Ancient One. The Ancient One, how dare you steal the treasure from the Divine Tower? You are digging your own grave. Tsing Hui did not even spare a glance at those manifested gods. When the glorious Sun Divinity's avatar came to his senses, he pointed at the barrier of the Divine Kingdom that he had prepared. A circle of ripples rapidly spread out from the barrier. The moment the ripples formed, the divine energy on his body began to change and became 80% similar to that of the glorious Sun Divinity. This divine energy fluctuation was the result of Tsing Hui's analysis of the locator mark left on him by the glorious Sun Divinity. If it were in the past, the glorious Sun Divinity would have been able to see through Tsing Hui's simulated divine energy fluctuation as soon as possible. But now, most of the glorious Sun Divinity's energy had been diverted to form a powerful avatar and was rushing to the fake location provided by Tsing Hui. The remaining avatar of the glorious Sun Divinity seemed to have just come to his senses and had just formed his avatar. This gave Tsing Hui, who had long been prepared, an opportunity. As he took a step forward, he, who was originally sealed in the Divine Kingdom, directly shuttled through the ripples. When glorious Sun Deity roared, he had already appeared outside the Divine Kingdom. Ancient One, how dare you? No, you're not the Ancient One. The Ancient One would never dare to be presumptuous in front of me. Despicable intruder, you will pay for what you've done. The avatar of the glorious Sun Divinity followed him out of the glorious Sun Divinity Tower. At the same time, he clenched his fist. His divine kingdom and all the divine kingdoms of the glorious Sun Divinity radiated dazzling flowing light. Mighty divine energy soared into the sky from the many divine kingdoms and formed an enormous ceiling formation. It fiercely suppressed Tsing Hui's body. In an instant, Tsing Hui felt as though he had sunk into a quagmire and could not move. At the same time, the power of the avatar of the glorious Sun Divinity also rapidly increased. In an instant, his avatar had risen from the level of an ordinary superior god to that of the glorious Sun Divinity. Moreover, it was at the level of the glorious Sun Divinity who had a divine system. Relying on the power of his avatar, the glorious Sun Divinity made a grabbing motion. It was as though there were countless scorching suns erupting in his palm at the same time. They carried with them the power to destroy heaven and earth and grab Tsing Hui. If Tsing Hui was caught in the attack, his body would be completely destroyed by the destructive power. He would be seriously injured even if he did not die. He really lives up to his reputation as a legendary supreme god. Even though I've diverted more than 70% of his power away, the remaining 30% is still as powerful as the glorious Sun Divinity at his peak in a very short time. It seems that I can't escape using conventional means. Tsing Hui felt regretful. However, since he dared to steal the principles of Tao from the glorious Sun Divinity's divine kingdom, he must have been prepared to escape unscathed. Otherwise, he would not have chosen to die. Just as the glorious Sun Divinity's attack was about to land, Jian Wushuang's body shook violently. He directly tore through the space in front of him and drilled into the depths of the universe. The glorious Sun Divinity immediately realized Tsing Hui's intention. His expression changed slightly and he chased after him without hesitation. At the same time, there were 3 powerful high-level gods chasing after Jian Wushuang. The divine kingdom power of the 3 gods had merged with the glorious sun divinity's avatar and provided him with a steady stream of divine power. Even though the glorious sun divinity's avatar had left his divine kingdom, it still maintained a strength close to that of the glorious sun divinity. It was easy for him to kill 3 or 4 ordinary powerful experts. An avatar that did not carry a divine kingdom had such power. It was obvious how powerful the glorious sun divinity was at his peak. Do you think you can escape? The glorious sun divinity waved his hand and a treasure that looked like a rainbow bridge appeared under his feet. As the rainbow bridge appeared, his speed skyrocketed. The originally barely maintained flying speed was broken in an instant. At this rate, it would not be long before the glorious sun divinity caught up with Tsing Hui. I can't go on like this. Tsing Hui's eyes sparkled. In the next moment his body split into 3. One of the figures carried the obvious aura of the ancient one-over-god. The other figure had the space great Tao of the divine beast Kuan-Peng. The last figure had the great Tao of the divine beast Kuan-Peng. The last figure had the great Tao of the divine beast Kuan-Peng. Even Supreme God Sunglory could not identify it. Doppelganger technique? What kind of doppelganger technique is this? The aura of the 3 avatars is close to the level of a high-level god. The glorious sun divinity's expression changed slightly. Considering that he was just an avatar, he ordered, Lei Ao, Zatches, the 2 of you go after the other 2 avatars. As he spoke, he set his sights on Tsing Hui's avatar that carried the aura of the ancient one-over-god and went after it. Although he could not tell which of the 3 avatars was real and which was fake, he could tell that the ancient one-over-god carried the aura of the divine kingdom, that was the divine kingdom of a high-level god. After a while, the glorious sun divinity's avatar caught up with the ancient one-over-god's avatar. He took out an orb that was as bright as the sun. Endless light mixed with flames that could burn through the void formed a sea of fire that spanned tens of billions of kilometers. It seemed to have ignited the entire void. World Annihilation Orb. Burn it. The flames burned and the ancient one-over-god's divine kingdom was instantly engulfed in a sea of fire. Then, it was burned to ashes at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. For a high god's divine kingdom to be incinerated by these flames, one could imagine just how powerful these flames were. However, although the glorious sun divinity's avatar had burned down a high-level god's divine kingdom, he did not look happy at all. The thief did not exist in this divine kingdom. The thief had chosen to sacrifice a high-level god's divine kingdom to deceive him. As for the real body, great supreme divinity, the intruder suddenly accelerated. Although his speed is not fast, he has surpassed me. I'm afraid I can't catch up with him, Your Majesty Supreme Divinity. I'm only chasing an avatar that is used to deceive people. The core of the avatar is the origin energy of the divine beast Kuan-Peng. I've already killed the Kuan-Peng avatar. After the glorious sun divinity identified that the one he was chasing was a fake avatar, the other 2 high-level gods reported the news at the same time. Damn it, catch up with Zatches? This thief stole my treasure. I won't let him go even if he escapes to the ends of the earth. The glorious sun divinity's eyes flashed with anger. He turned around abruptly and chased after Tsing Hui again. Due to his previous delay, Tsing Hui had left him far behind. He chased for 3 whole months before he could sense Tsing Hui's location again. However, less than 4 days after he sensed Tsing Hui's location, the surrounding environment began to change constantly. The power of Great Tao began to fade away and was replaced by the increasingly dense chaotic Yuan Qi. The grayish-black chaotic Yuan Qi, which seemed to contain infinite profound meaning of life and death, seeped in from the direction they were heading. It eroded the divine energy and divine consciousness of the glorious sun divinity's avatar, causing the consumption of the avatar to increase exponentially. The chaotic void. The thief's escape destination is the chaotic void. Damn it, half a month ago, I faintly guessed the direction he was escaping to, but I couldn't believe it. After all, the chaotic void is a land of death for us. Even a powerful expert can only survive for a few hundred years in the chaotic void. But I didn't expect. The glorious sun divinity looked at the environment that had suddenly changed, and his heart was filled with grievances. After a moment, a chilling light flashed in his eyes. So what if it's the chaotic void? A powerful expert can only survive for a few hundred years in the chaotic void under normal circumstances. If a fierce battle consumes a lot of energy, this time will be reduced exponentially to 40 years, 30 years, or even 20 years. I'll chase you for 20 years in the chaotic void and exhaust your energy. I'll let you enter the chaotic void alive, but you won't be able to return alive. The glorious sun divinity, who had rushed into the chaotic void, did not reduce his speed. Instead, he chased even faster. Fortunately, Xing Hui, who was a creature of the chaotic void, could travel much faster in the chaotic void. In addition, the glorious sun divinity had an innate advantage in the chaotic void. Therefore, the glorious sun divinity could not catch up with him. The 5 powerful experts, who were equivalent to powerful experts, chased each other in the chaotic void. Soon 20 years had passed. During these 20 years, the 5 of them had long escaped into the depths of the chaotic void. Even though the glorious sun divinity had the Master of Gods as his backer, he could not guarantee that he could return safely from the chaotic void. Therefore he had to stop. He concealed his weary expression and pretended to be gloating. I don't believe that he can come back alive after going so far into the chaotic void. We are in charge of the chase and have exhausted our energy to the limit, let alone this little thief who is being chased by us. Even if he can find a way back, he will die on the way back due to excessive energy consumption. That's right. This little thief will die for sure. The high god who came with the glorious sun divinity hastily agreed. They were different from the glorious sun divinity. Perhaps the glorious sun divinity still had some energy left, but these high gods had truly reached their limits. They did not know whether the little thief would survive or not, but the 3 of them would most likely die on the way back. The glorious sun divinity nodded. He was still extremely dissatisfied that he had not killed Xing Hui with his own hands. However, considering that Xing Hui had most likely died after escaping into the depths of the chaotic void, he slightly eased his anger. Alright, let's go back. Since he's already a dead man, there's no need to fuss over it. Chapter 903. I finally gave up. Xing Hui breathed a sigh of relief as though a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders when the glorious sun divinity and the other 3 turned to leave. I'm afraid I'll be lost in the void of chaos if I continue to chase after them. Fortunately, the Lord of Chaos is huge enough to guide me back to the void of chaos like a bright light in the fog. If it weren't for the Lord of Chaos, I don't know how long it would take for me to return safely. If I were to go in the wrong direction, I would be lost in the void of chaos forever. Although chaos beings had adapted to the special environment of the void of chaos, Xing Hui, a chaos being who had yet to fully transform, was just too insignificant in the boundless void of chaos. Traveling in the void of chaos was like a human being who had the ability to survive in space saying that he would walk from one star to another. It was easy to imagine the consequences of getting lost in such a vast environment. I have to find the path I took when I came here as soon as possible. Xing Hui thought. He did not want to waste a moment and turned to return. However, after flying for less than half a month, Xing Hui's body suddenly stopped. As he had never ventured so deep into the void of chaos, if he wanted to return, he would have to return to the Lord of God's domain by following the path he took. Even though he could slightly change his direction and enter the Lord of God's domain, if the glorious sun divinity wanted to keep an eye on him and had placed spies in an extremely vast area, there was a small probability that he would be discovered when he entered the Lord of God's domain. Although the probability was not high, if he were to be discovered, he would be in great trouble. With this thought in mind, Xing Hui slightly slowed down. The void of chaos is filled with endless dangers for high gods like the glorious sun divinity, but for me, a chaos being, it's much less dangerous. As long as I'm not targeted by great and terrifying beings like the evil gods and the Lord of Gods, the void of chaos is the most suitable place for me to cultivate. In that case, Why don't I enter the Lord of God's domain after completing the cultivation of the second layer of the Tao disc? On the one hand, I can wear down the glorious Sun Divinity's patience and avoid being blocked by him. On the other hand, once I complete the second layer of the Tao disc, even if I encounter the glorious Sun Divinity again, I won't be completely helpless. With this thought in mind, Xing Hui flew unhurriedly along the path he took while concentrating his attention on the Fortune Jade. Having been supplemented by the Tao disc, the Fortune Jade was clearly more mysterious than before. It was overflowing with light, and if a cultivator from the immortal Tao civilization were to catch a glimpse of the Tao disc's power, it would be enough for them to enter a state of epiphany and develop a new understanding of the Tao disc. They could even use this understanding as a foundation to break through and ascend to a higher realm. Of the 906 Tao discourses, 76 are complete, while the rest are fragmented. The Lord of Gods is truly the Lord of Gods. If I were to collect these Tao discourses, who knows how many years it would take me. But not only did the Lord of Gods collect them all, he didn't hesitate to abandon them when he realized that they were of no use to him. Xing Hui's gaze focused on the Tao disc and he sighed inwardly. The supreme ruler of a star naturally wouldn't care for 1 or 2 tons of gold, but if it were distributed to a single person, that person would become a billionaire overnight. Xing Hui's gaze paused on the Tao disc and he eliminated all of the fragmented ones. Soon he focused on the complete ones. 76 Tao discourses. They were all different. Xing Hui's gaze carefully comprehended the 76 Tao discourses. Soon, however, he frowned. These Tao discourses? They're all relatively simple Tao discourses. Although they're relatively easy to cultivate, they don't have any offensive effects. Xing Hui looked at the Tao discourses and felt a little troubled. Although he could understand that the Tao discourses that were good at attacking would have been torn apart by the invading Lord of Gods, the Lord of Chaos, and the Lord of Time. Those that could survive would definitely be marginal Tao discourses. However, the fact that these Tao discourses were so weak still made him hesitate. If he really combined these Tao discourses with the unification Great Tao to simulate an immortal Tao civilization, the development of the world might be very stable and rapid, but killing would definitely be its greatest drawback. Xing Hui was silent for a moment. He had no choice but to turn his gaze to the fragmented Tao discourses. Among the fragmented Tao discourses, there were naturally many that were good at killing. However, the more powerful a Tao discourses was, the more damaged they were. Some of the Tao discourses that were slightly better than Xing Hui's eyes were almost completely destroyed. Even if he had the creation divine jade, he would still have to pay a huge price to repair them. As for the Tao discourses that did not even have any remaining fragmented Tao discourses, even the creation divine jade was powerless to repair them. The most outstanding Tao discourses among these Tao discourses is called the evil discourses. It's a Tao discourses derived from the Thunder Great Tao and the Heavenly Punishment Great Tao. Among the many Tao discourses, it's already a third-tier Tao discourses. However, this is already the best Tao discourses I can find. Xing Hui stared at these Tao discourses. Through them, he could already understand the devastation of the war in the immortal Tao civilization. Almost all the Tao discourses related to attacking had been destroyed. It was equivalent to a country's military factories and barracks being completely destroyed. Although the country's farms, fishing grounds, and pastures remained intact, there was still no hope of resistance. Could it be that I can only choose 49 complete Great Taos at will and complete the cultivation of the second level of the Great Tao disc? Xing Hui was a little unwilling. His attitude did not allow him to treat the cultivation path he was about to embark on so negatively. With these unwillingness, Xing Hui's gaze once again swept across these fragmented Tao discourses. After a moment, a somewhat familiar Tao discourses appeared in front of him. The Tao of murderous intent? As this secondary Tao discourses entered Xing Hui's eyes, a flash of inspiration suddenly flashed in his mind. Wait a minute. A Tao discourses of extremely high quality. I might not have them. Xing Hui's mind suddenly focused on the supreme sword technique he had previously obtained from the Void Sword Pavilion. It was a swordsmanship that he called the Immortal Slashing Tao Sword Technique. This swordsmanship, or the 4 supreme swordsmanships of the Void Sword Pavilion, was condensed from 4 fragmented Tao discourses. Because of this, the divine creation jade could use these swordsmanships as the foundation to deduce swordsmanships such as the immortal slashing sword chi. Since the divine creation jade could deduce the immortal slashing sword chi based on those swordsmanships, it was possible that it could rededuce the 4 fragmented Tao discourses through those 4 swordsmanships. It should be known that these Tao discourses were powerful enough to catch the eye of the Master of Chaos and condense them into supreme swordsmanships. If he could really deduce these 4 Tao discourses, the drawbacks of the lack of offensive power of the 49 Tao discourses would be completely made up. Very well, according to this idea, I'll leave 4 positions for the 4 supreme swordsmanships of the Void Sword Pavilion. As for the other Tao discourses, I'll choose the best ones and return them to their original positions. As for those fragmented Tao discourses, as long as the grade is high enough, I can also use the Divine Creation Jade to complete them. Anyway, over the years, the Divine Creation Jade has accumulated a large number of Tao discourses. If I don't intend to upgrade the level of the Son of Chaos, I can use them all to deduce those fragmented Tao discourses. Thinking of this, Sing Hui's cultivation path in front of him suddenly became clear. One by one, the Tao discourses were selected by him. Like satellites, they surrounded the core of the great path of unification, full of a natural and harmonious beauty. As many Tao discourses surrounded it, countless streams of light dissipated from these Tao discourses. Under the guidance of the great path of unification, wonderful changes began to take place. However, because the 49 Tao discourses were not complete, these changes did not reveal their final form even though they were in the process of being nurtured. The world is derived from these Tao discourses. Sing Hui looked at the perfect change in front of him and muttered to himself. At this time, he could not wait to perfect the last 4 Tao discourses so that he could witness the final form of these 50 Tao discourses as soon as possible. Void Sword Pavilion. Sing Hui took a deep breath and looked at the territory of the Master of Gods. Without completing the evolution of the virtual immortal Tao civilization world, his great path disc technique could not be considered to have reached the 2nd level. Naturally, he was inferior to the glorious Sun Divinity, who was a supreme ultimate god. It was very likely that the glorious Sun Divinity was waiting for his return in the territory of the Master of Gods. The closer I am to success, the more I can't be careless. Sing Hui said. Then he turned slightly, corrected his direction, and quickly shuttled through the chaotic void. He planned to spend hundreds and thousands of years avoiding the sealed area that the glorious Sun Divinity might form. Although it would take a lot of time, at least he did not have to worry about being in danger. With this thought, Sing Hui quickly shuttled through the area close to the territory of the Master of Gods. Ordinary powerful people who fell into the chaotic void and were eroded by chaotic vitality might not be able to survive for hundreds of years. However, as a chaotic life form, even if he had not really grown up, Sing Hui could still live in the chaotic void like a fish in water. Now, compared to an adult chaotic life form, his shuttling speed was just a lot slower. In addition, the restrictive effect of the chaotic void environment on him no longer existed. Under such circumstances, he would not be affected even if he lived in the chaotic void for tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, or even millions of years. Time flew by. 600 years passed in the blink of an eye. After spending 600 years, Sing Hui went far away from the territory that the glorious Sun Divinity might seal, and then transformed into a divine spirit again and plunged into the territory of the Master of Gods. After arriving at the territory of the Master of Gods, he did not dare to delay any longer. With the help of the teleportation formation in the territory of the Master of Gods, he quickly arrived at the front line and then went through the front line to the territory of the Master of Chaos. After hurrying for a while, when he reappeared in the divine wilderness great world, 618 years had passed. Chapter 904. I'm only missing 4 great path precepts that specialize in killing. If the power of those 4 great path precepts is not satisfactory, The immortal civilization world I simulated will be reduced to a deformed world that is only stable and not aggressive. Xing Hui sensed the virtual immortal civilization world that he had constructed based on the creation jade and the unification great path, and cast his eyes on the divine wilderness great world. The divine wilderness great world had not changed much compared to hundreds of years ago. The great path imprint that he and Lord of Water Qingshui had left here was still the same as before, deterring any cultivator who had designs on the divine wilderness great world. Due to the geographical location, there were no traces of powerful cultivators around the divine wilderness great world. The forces around the dominators were mainly dominators who had cultivated the immemorial sacred body. Although the difference between dominators and powerful cultivators was not as obvious as that between supreme beings and dominators, it was still easy for a powerful cultivator to kill a dominator. It was just like how a cultivator of the 4th level of the Saint Realm who had cultivated magical powers could kill a cultivator of the Golden Elixir Realm. Under such circumstances, knowing that the divine wilderness great world had the protection of 2 powerful cultivators, even if those dominators knew that there were rich profits in the divine wilderness great world, they still did not dare to have any designs on it. Whoosh! Xing Hui stepped into the void and quickly entered the divine wilderness great world. Xing Hui, who was busy completing the 2nd step of the Great Path Disc, did not want to waste any more time. He directly found the representative of the Void Sword Pavilion in the divine wilderness great world, Sword Master Qingkong. The moment she learned that Xing Hui had returned, Sword Master Qingkong had already greeted him and saluted, "Greetings to Sword God Xing Hui. Sword Master Qingkong, I need to see the highest leaders of the Void Sword Pavilion and make a deal with them." "See the highest leaders of the Void Sword Pavilion?" Sword Master Qingkong was slightly startled and then hurriedly said, "Of course, if Sword God Xing Hui has any requests, the 4 great sword masters of the Void Sword Pavilion will immediately come to the divine wilderness great world to visit." "No need. I'll go to the Void Sword Pavilion. It just so happens that I've never been to the Void Sword Pavilion. I'll take this opportunity to learn about the real appearance of the Void Sword Pavilion." The Sword Master of Clear Sky bowed in a hurry. "If the Green Ruin Sword God is willing to pay a visit to our Void Sword Pavilion, we'll be more than happy to do so. I'll send a message to the upper echelon of our pavilion right now so that they can make the necessary preparations for your arrival." "Thank you for your trouble. Go and make the arrangements. I'll go take a look at the Hunyuan Sword Sect. We'll set off in 3 days." "Yes, Lord Sword God." Xing Hui nodded and arrived at the Hunyuan Sword Sect in a flash. Although the 4 supreme swordsmanship of the Void Sword Pavilion were precious, Xing Hui believed that he had a way to persuade him. As long as he obtained these 4 swordsmanship and deduced and perfected the great Tao law behind these 4 swordsmanship, he would be able to completely complete the 2nd level of the Great Tao Plate. At that time, while his cultivation increased, he would also face the cultivation of the last level of the Great Tao Plate. This level was somewhat similar to the cultivators of the Great Development Gate. They needed to gather the power of the 12 divine beasts to finally attack the source plate. The last time he left the divine wilderness great world, he had already set up a method to try it on the 12 disciples. Now, he was going to the Hunyuan Sword Sect to check on the cultivation of these 12 disciples. Supreme Elder. Xing Hui's return to the Hunyuan Sword Sect naturally caused a sensation in the Hunyuan Sword Sect. Not long after, the higher-ups of the Hunyuan Sword Sect, except for esteemed Zhu Zhao who was in seclusion, had all come to Xing Hui. Thanks to the unreserved support of the Void Sword Pavilion and the abundant resources left behind by the Qing ruins, the Hunyuan Sword Sect had given birth to another 2 experts who had reached world creation with a thought in the past few centuries. One was naturally esteemed Zhang Jin, who had the best relationship with Xing Hui, and the other was Long Rainbow Sword Master, who could be called by Shuang's master. In addition to these 2 people, cultivators of the traversing realm had also sprung up like bamboo shoots after a rain. Now, there were already hundreds of people, and the remaining cultivators who had cultivated the divine true body had reached nearly 10,000 people. The Hunyuan Sword Sect had officially become a top sect that ruled a world. At this point, If the Hunyuan Sword sect was not in a special world with rich resources like the Divine Wilderness Great World, but in an ordinary low-energy world, it was not impossible for them to rule the entire world. Xing Hui was slightly satisfied with the speed of development of the Hunyuan Sword sect. After chatting with them for a while, he had already summoned the Qiyuan Sword Spirit and the 12 disciples, who he had left here to learn from Zhiyun. After more than 600 years, Zhiyun's deduction of the ultimate sword Dao had become more complete. However, due to Qing Su's guidance on the path of attaining a fortune god artifact with his body, his rate of cultivation slowed down slightly. Even though he had still grown by a level, reaching a level where he was on par with any peak conqueror expert, he was still a level away from reaching the peak of the Hunyuan Sword sect, world creation with a thought. On the other hand, after the Qiyuan Sword Spirit had completely comprehended the ultimate sword Dao created by Zhiyun, he already had the power to refine a top divine artifact. Next, he only needed to wait for Xing Hui to prepare a creation artifact for him, and he would be able to spend a long time devouring that creation artifact, so that he would have the power not inferior to a creation artifact. After understanding the growth of the Qiyuan Sword Spirit, Xing Hui was extremely satisfied. With a smile on his face, he said, "Qiyuan, follow me for the next period of time. I will find a way to find a creation artifact for you to help you break through." "Thank you, Father." The Qiyuan Sword Spirit responded happily. He turned into a divine sword and fell into Xing Hui's hand. Immediately after, Xing Hui's gaze fell on Jun. With a wave of his hand, several divine weapons appeared in his hand. "These are all paragon artifacts. You are different from the Qiyuan Sword Spirit. The Qiyuan Sword Spirit cultivates according to my great Dao law. As long as I can continue to grow and give him enough help, his realm will continue to increase. It won't be long before I can raise his realm to a level that is not inferior to that of a great divine master. At that time, he can naturally slowly try to devour and refine a creation artifact. But after all, you are only a human, and your realm is limited. It is more suitable for you to evolve in the direction of a paragon artifact. These paragon artifacts are all yours. I hope you can find one that suits you among these paragon artifacts. Zhiyun's achievements today are all thanks to Master. Don't worry, I will definitely not disappoint you." Xing Hui nodded in satisfaction. After indicating for him to leave, his gaze passed through the crowd and landed on the remaining 12 disciples. Although Xing Hui had planted great Dao seeds in these 12 disciples and spared no effort in nurturing them, there was still an extremely serious polarization in just a few hundred years. The one with the highest cultivation had already caught up with Zhiyun and reached a level that was not inferior to the traversal realm. As for the one with the lowest cultivation, he had not even reached the prominent divine realm. If it were not for the fact that he had refined many heavenly treasures to extend his life, he would probably already be facing the problem of his lifespan running out. Xing Hui's gaze swept across the 12 disciples one by one. He was rather satisfied with those who had cultivated to the divine true body realm and the traversal realm. After understanding their cultivation progress and a series of cultivation methods, he also gave some guesses and pointers. But for that disciple who was only at the green netherworld realm and the other golden core realm disciples, he frowned. Seeing this scene, the disciples lowered their heads at the same time, their expressions filled with guilt. "We have failed Master's teachings. Please punish us, Master." The 5 disciples who were not at the divine realm knelt down at the same time. Xing Hui's gaze landed on the 5 disciples. These 5 disciples cultivated the divine beast bloodlines of Yuing, Bai Qi, Ouroboros, Giant Turtle, and Blood Mosquito. What they had in common was that these 5 great Daos had been completely lost, which meant that their divine beasts had all fallen. Currently, there were only 6.5 great Dao laws left in the territory of the Master of Chaos. They were the Torch Dragon, Golden Crow, Kunpeng, Primal Chaos, Qilin, Tong Tian, and Yujia. It was said that Yujia had fallen once, and the current Yujia was not the real divine beast Yujia. If one had to rank these divine beast bloodlines, they would be Kunpeng, Golden Crow, Primal Chaos, Qilin, Torch Dragon, Tong Tian, and half of the 6.5 Yujia. From these disciples, Xing Hui could also see that their cultivation levels were basically divided in this order. Among the 7 disciples, Tong Tian and Yu Jia were only at the profound void stage and domain stage respectively, which was the 2nd and 1st level of the divine realm. There's nothing wrong with my guess. As the great Tao of chaos, the great Tao of unity has an extremely high compatibility effect with other laws. It's like the ancient saying that 2 tigers cannot live on one mountain, but it doesn't mean that 1 tiger and 1 bear can't live on the same mountain. What truly restricts their growth is the great Tao itself. Realizing this, Xing Hui felt a headache coming on. The bloodlines of Tong Tian and Yu Jia were slightly better. Although they were extremely rare, they still existed. However, the top divine beasts like Yuying, Bai Qi, Ouroboros, Giant Turtle, and Blood Mosquito were said to have fallen long ago. Their true bodies were scattered into countless great Tao fragments. These great Tao fragments were obtained by many cultivators, forming a series of cultivators similar to the Great Development Gate. Currently, the Gate Master with the highest cultivation base in the Great Development Gate only cultivated 8 types of Great Tao. The short time was one of the problems. Another problem was that they couldn't obtain Great Tao fragments from the Kunpeng, Golden Crow, Primal Chaos, Qilin, and Torch Dragon. After all, Great Tao fragments were an opportunity for those divine beasts to become chaos creatures in the future. Even if a divine beast died, there would only be a few hundred fragments left on its body. It could be seen how precious Great Tao fragments were. Asking a living divine beast to offer up its Great Tao fragments was simply equivalent to killing a beast and extracting its blood. This was absolutely not something that those divine beasts would allow. However, the Great Tao fragments of the 12 divine beasts were an unavoidable part of the Great Tao Plate's 3rd level cultivation. I need the complete Great Tao fragments of the 12 divine beasts. The Gate Master and Elders of the Great Development Gate also need them. The 12 divine beasts are different from the true evil gods and chaos creatures. Although they are countless times stronger than powerful experts, they can't be considered as true chaos creatures or evil gods. Perhaps one day, I can join forces with the top experts of the Great Development Gate and try to kill those divine beasts. Even if we can't kill them, as long as we can kill enough origin energy to condense Great Tao fragments, our goal will be completed. Xing Hui had a plan in mind. However, before carrying out this plan, he had to first complete the 2nd level of the Great Tao Plate. While Xing Hui stayed in the Origin Sword sect and studied the experiences of several disciples who fused the Great Tao of Unity with the Great Tao of Divine Beasts, Immortal Emperor Tsong Hai, who was stationed in the Divine Wilderness Great World, found Xing Hui. Lord Xing Hui, the Heavenly Lord of Myriad Treasures, sent a message to you 300 years ago. He asked you to go to the Jade Dragon soaring victorious sky. Chapter 905. Important things? What important things? Xing Hui glanced in the direction of the Void Sword Pavilion. Now, the most important thing for him was undoubtedly to go to the Void Sword Pavilion and complete the transaction with them. He wanted to obtain the 4 supreme swordsmanship of the Void Sword Pavilion and deduce the complete 49 dermas. Then, he could simulate the immortal Tao civilization world with the Fortune Jade as the foundation. Lord of Plentiful Treasures didn't tell me the specifics. I just vaguely heard him mention that it seems to have something to do with a statue. A statue? Xing Hui frowned. Could it be the blood-colored statue with the evil god residing in his body? But now that the 2nd level of the Great Tao Disc was about to be completed, he really didn't want to be distracted by other things. Lord of Plentiful Treasures had waited for 300 years anyway, so he didn't need to worry about it. He said directly, I have made an agreement with the Clear Sky Sword Master of the Void Sword Pavilion. I need to go to the Void Sword Pavilion. I can return in a year or 10 years. At that time, I will go to the soaring Jade Dragon Sky to visit Lord of Plentiful Treasures. Immortal Emperor Tsonghai, please convey the message for me. Hearing this, Immortal Emperor Tsonghai hesitated for a moment and said, Well, I will tell the truth to the Lord of Heaven. Xing Hui nodded. 3 days passed quickly. On the 3rd day, Xing Hui met up with the Clear Sky Sword Master again. Without any delay, The two quickly entered the Zhun Central World through the transmission formation. Then, they used the transmission formation of the Zhun Central World to pass through one world after another. They basically chose the kind of large world that didn't seal itself and had an external transmission formation. Using the transmission formation to travel, the effect was extraordinary. In addition, he slightly used his privilege as a great medium along the way, so the speed was extremely fast. In less than 4 months, the two had already appeared in the Void World where the Void Sword Pavilion was located. As soon as they arrived in the Void World, the Liha Sword Master, who had received the news early, had already led several other Sword Masters of the Void Sword Pavilion to wait at the transmission formation. When Tsing Hui walked out of the transmission formation, he saw several Sword Masters and hundreds of high-level members of the Void Sword Pavilion welcoming him. Sword God Tsing Hui, welcome to our great Void World. The Liha Sword Master stepped forward on behalf of the Void Sword Pavilion and greeted him warmly. Sorry to disturb you, Sword Master of Liha. Tsing Hui nodded slightly. What's there to disturb? We're happy that Sword God Tsing Hui is willing to visit our Void Sword Pavilion. Come on, Sword God Tsing Hui, please come in. I'll introduce you to the other Sword Masters of our Void Sword Pavilion. As the Liha Sword Master spoke, he waved his hand and drew out the other Sword Masters behind him. These two Sword Masters are the other two most powerful Sword Masters of the Void Sword Pavilion. They are the Red Slaughter Sword Master and the Heavenly Cave Sword Master. They are in charge of the Demon Slayer Sword and the Heaven Sealing Sword Technique. They are the inheritors of the Demon Slayer Sword Technique and the Heaven Sealing Sword Technique. Demon Slayer Sword Master, Sky Sealing Sword Master. The main purpose of Tsing Hui's visit this time was to cooperate with the 4 most powerful Sword Masters of the Void Sword Pavilion. Naturally, he was quite polite to the other 2 Sword Masters. And this is the Sword Master of the Dragon Slayer Sword. The Calamity Sword Master who wields the Evil Slayer Sword has been relieved of his position as the Sword Master of the Evil Slayer Sword because of his incompetence in the Divine Wilderness world. He has entered the back mountain of our Void Sword Pavilion to reflect on his mistakes. The one who currently wields the Evil Slayer Sword and cultivates the Evil Slayer Sword technique is the new Sword Master of the Dragon Slayer Sword. Greetings to Sword God Tsing Hui. The Sword Master of the Dragon Slayer Sword who was introduced hurriedly stepped forward and saluted. When Tsing Hui saw this, he understood why the Void Sword Pavilion had deprived the Sword Master of the Calamity Sword of his position as the Evil Slayer Sword Master. The purpose was to give him an explanation. Even though he did not pursue the responsibility of the Master of the Tsang Tribulation Sword of the Void Sword Pavilion, the status of the Qing ruins was no longer ordinary. They must have already investigated the identity of the members of the Great Development Sect. Under these circumstances, even if he did not say anything, the Void Sword Pavilion was forced to give a reasonable explanation for the unpleasant incident that happened to the Master of the Tsang Tribulation Sword in the past in order to curry favor with him. Thinking of this, Tsing Hui's face showed a slight smile. Sword Master of the Dragon Slayer Sword, it seems that I have some fate with the Sword Master of the Dragon Slayer Sword. When I was still in the Longevity Realm, I also had an identity and was in charge of an island. I was called the Dragon Slayer Island Master, which is quite similar to the title of the Sword Master. The Sword Master of the Dragon Slayer Sword received the goodwill of Tsing Hui, and the smile on his face became more sincere. Is that so? I didn't expect that I would have such an honor to have a title similar to Tsing Hui's Sword God. If there is a chance in the future, I would like to visit the island that Sword God Tsing Hui mentioned. I hope that Sword God Tsing Hui will allow me. Of course, our Hunyuan Sword Sect and the Void Sword Pavilion are the best allies. If the Sword Master of the Dragon Slayer Sword wants to visit our Divine Wilderness Great World, our Hunyuan Sword Sect and even the entire Divine Wilderness Great World will welcome you at any time. Tsing Hui said. Next, he continued to exchange greetings with several powerful swordsmanship masters of the Void Sword Pavilion. After a while, at the request of Tsing Hui, they had already arrived above the mountain where the sword masters of the Void Sword Pavilion were training and competing. This mountain was called a mountain, but in fact, It was a giant sword that had been tempered thousands of times. It was just that the giant sword was so big that it had formed a mountain range over time under the precipitation of time, which made it look like a mountain range. In fact, due to the sturdiness of the giant sword, it was not easy for even a sword master level expert to cause too much damage to the giant sword. This was also the reason why the sword masters of the Void Sword Pavilion chose this place as the training ground. Everyone, I have specially come to visit the Void Sword Pavilion this time. As the sword master of the Clear Sky Sword sect said, I have come for a deal. But before talking about the deal, please take a look at my swordsmanship first. After arriving here, Xing Hui did not waste any more words and went straight to the point. Under the cautious gazes of the Liha Sword Master, the Dragon-Slaying Sword Master, the Crimson Slaughter Sword Master, and the Heavenly Abode Sword Master, Xing Hui directly displayed the Immortal Eliminating Sword Qi. Streaks of sword light crisscrossed in the void and quickly formed a Dao sealing domain, causing the Great Dao to no longer exist in this void. As he practiced to the end, he completed the demonstration of the complete form of the Immortal Eliminating Sword Qi and created a special domain that completely sealed off the Great Dao Law. This sealing power not only sealed supreme experts at the first level of the chaotic realm, but also those great divines who had transformed their bodies into the Great Dao. Once their Great Dao power spread out, it would be quickly sealed, making it difficult for these great divines to exert even half of their battle strength. This swordsmanship. The four sword masters felt the power of this swordsmanship and were all shocked. Among them, the Liha Sword Master, who was the inheritor of the Immortal Eliminating Sword technique, was even more surprised when he stared at the swordsmanship that Xing Hui had performed. In this swordsmanship, he could vaguely see the shadow of the Immortal Eliminating Sword technique. However, compared to the Immortal Eliminating Sword technique that they cultivated, Xing Hui's swordsmanship was undoubtedly more powerful. Does the Liha Sword Master feel that this swordsmanship is familiar? Xing Hui noticed the strange expression on the Liha Sword Master's face and asked with a smile. The Liha Sword Master looked a little embarrassed. After hesitating for a moment, he still voiced his doubts. To be honest, I do feel that this swordsmanship that Sword God Xing Hui performed is somewhat familiar. However, after looking at it carefully, I realized that I was overthinking. This swordsmanship of Sword God Xing Hui is much more powerful than I imagined. Does the Liha Sword Master want to know the name of this swordsmanship? Name? Please tell me, Sword God Xing Hui. Xing Hui looked at the Liha Sword Master and said meaningfully, I call this swordsmanship the Immortal Eliminating Sword Qi. You've seen its power when it's cultivated to perfection. It can almost seal off 50% of a great medium's battle strength. A great medium whose battle strength is sealed by 50%, I'm afraid that even a peak dominator can cause harm to the great medium. Immortal Eliminating Sword Qi? The Liha Sword Master's expression suddenly changed. He knew that his guess had been confirmed. For a moment, the Liha Sword Master's face could not help but show anger. If it were not for the fact that Xing Hui was a great medium, he would have exploded at this moment. Sword God Xing Hui, what you're doing, Liha Sword Master, please calm down. I didn't steal the strongest swordsmanship of your Void Sword Pavilion. It's just that I once saw you use the Immortal Slashing Sword technique, and then I deduced it and perfected it to a more perfect form. You saw me use the Immortal Eliminating Sword technique and deduced it to a more perfect form. The Liha Sword Master frowned. If the one who spoke was not Xing Hui, who was a great medium, he naturally would not care. However, in the face of Xing Hui, who had joined the Great Development Gate and could be considered a powerhouse among the great medium, he had to restrain his temper. That's right. Otherwise, why would my swordsmanship be more powerful than your Immortal Eliminating Sword technique? Xing Hui said lightly. The Immortal Eliminating Sword Qi was more powerful and more perfect than the Immortal Eliminating Sword technique. This was the best persuasion effect. Even if the Liha Sword Master did not dare to believe it, he still did not know how to refute. But the Immortal Eliminating Sword technique is the most powerful swordsmanship of the Void Sword Pavilion. You have never received the inheritance of the Void Sword Pavilion, so how could you surpass it in such a short time? Why not? Liha Swordmaster, if you intend to look at me with ordinary eyes, then you are gravely mistaken. Don't forget, I cultivated from the level of a mortal to the level of a great medium. How long did it take? Xing Hui said lightly, his expression full of arrogance. 1,000 years. This phrase suddenly appeared in the mind of the Liha Swordmaster. For a moment he was speechless. Cultivating to the level of a great medium in 1,000 years. This kind of incredible thing had happened, let alone the small matter of him secretly learning the most powerful swordsmanship of the Void Sword Pavilion and surpassing it. After a while, the Liha Sword Master laughed helplessly. I have never doubted the talent of Sword God Xing Hui. I wonder what is the purpose of Sword God Xing Hui demonstrating the swordsmanship in front of me this time? Please speak frankly. Well, since the Liha Sword Master is so straightforward, then I will not beat around the bush. I intend to impart the immortal eliminating sword Qi to the Void Sword Pavilion for free. The eyes of the Liha Sword Master suddenly lit up. Sword God Xing Hui, are you serious? Xing Hui nodded, but there is another thing that I have some selfish motives for. Listen to it and think about it after listening. The 4 most powerful swordsmanship of the Void Sword Pavilion can be formed into a sword formation. Only when the sword formation is formed can it exert its greatest power. If you learn the new immortal eliminating sword Qi, the run-in of the sword formation will be a problem. Therefore, if the Liha Sword Master and the other sword masters trust me, why not pass the next 3 swordsmanships to me? I can assure you that I will deduce these 3 swordsmanships and finally return to you 3 swordsmanships that are more powerful than all the swordsmanships you have now. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.